A pregnant and poor single mother begged a millionaire not to throw away food scraps. He made a proposal that would change everything, and what began in desperation turned into an unexpected love. A story that will touch your heart. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like and comment where you are watching from. The June rain fell relentlessly over New York City, turning the streets of the Upper East Side into dark mirrors reflecting the yellowed lights of the street lamps. It was one of those winter nights in the city where the cold seemed to penetrate to the bone, damp and unyielding. Sarah Johnson, 32 years old, stood at the corner of East 70th Street and Madison Avenue, watching the activity of the Gourmet Bistro through the fogged-up window. Her hands trembled as they clutched her thin coat against her body, trying futilely to protect the 6-month baby bump that protruded beneath the soaked fabric. She knew that routine well. For the past 3 weeks, she had come here every Tuesday and Friday, always around 11 at night when the crowd thinned and the staff began preparing for closing. She would stand there on the corner, hidden under the awning of a closed clothing store, waiting for the exact moment when the head chef would come out the back with the garbage bags. Over time, she had learned to calculate the timing with almost mathematical precision. Between 11:15 p.m. and 11:30 p.m., depending on how many late customers were still in the dining room. Sarah was not from New York City. Her accent revealed her origins from a small town in the Hudson Valley, where everyone knew each other, and gossip spread faster than any official news. She had arrived in the city 3 months earlier with an old backpack containing her entire life. 2 changes of clothes, documents, $300 she had saved secretly over months, and a positive pregnancy test she still kept, as proof that she was not going crazy. Her dark brown hair, once always well kept and tied in a neat ponytail, now clung to her wet face, heavy with water. Her almond-shaped eyes, once described by her mother as the color of honey in the sun, were sunken, surrounded by dark circles that no amount of sleep seemed to erase. But there was something in them that the rain and exhaustion could not completely wash away, a wounded dignity, but not broken, a determination that kept her standing even when her body begged her to give up. That night, however, something was different. Hunger was not just an annoyance. It was a physical pain that cut through her stomach in increasingly intense waves. She hadn't eaten a full meal in 2 days, since the money from the last odd job she managed to get had run out. The saltines she bought on sale were gone that morning. And the baby. The baby was moving less and less, as if it too were giving up. "No," she whispered to herself, a protective hand over her belly. "Just hold on a little longer, my love. Mommy will find something for us." The church clock in the distance struck 11:15. Sarah took a deep breath, filling her lungs with damp air, and began walking toward the back of the bistro. Her old boots made a squelching noise with each step, her feet completely soaked. The back alley was poorly lit, only a solitary light flickering above the grey service door. She positioned herself next to the large trash bins, trying to become invisible. She didn't want to cause trouble. She didn't want them to call the police. She just needed a chance. Gradually, voices began to echo from inside the bistro. Sarah immediately recognized the heavy French accent of Chef John Smith, a short and stocky man she had observed a few times coming out with garbage bags. Yes, the sauce was perfect today. Mrs. Thompson ate every last bit of the dish. His voice was approaching, animated, talking to someone Sarah couldn't see. "Did you see how she asked to greet me personally? That's what I call success." The metal door opened with a loud creak. Chef John appeared, carrying 2 large black bags, still laughing at some comment someone had made inside. He was a man in his 50s, with that kind of belly that comes from frequently tasting his own food, and he wore the traditional white chef's uniform, already stained after a long night of service. Sarah waited for him to deposit the bags in the bins. It was now or never. She stepped forward, emerging from the shadows. Excuse me." Her voice came out weaker than she intended. The chef turned, startled, bringing a hand to his chest. "My God, you scared me." He blinked a few times, adjusting his eyes to the dim light. When he finally saw her completely, a pregnant woman, soaked, too thin to be expecting a baby, his expression changed from shock to concern. "Miss, are you okay? Do you need help?" Sarah opened her mouth, but the words got stuck in her throat. How to explain? How to put into words the humiliation of being there, asking for food scraps? She, who had always worked, who had always supported herself, who had sworn to herself that she would never be a burden to anyone. She tried again, tears mixing with the rain on her face. "I know you're going to throw this away. I've seen it before. Please, don't throw it away. I need it. The baby needs it." Her voice broke on the last word. The chef frowned, clearly uncomfortable. "But I can't just give you garbage food, you understand? That's not—" He gestured, searching for the words. "It's not right. You should look for a shelter, a health clinic. There are places that—" "Please," Sarah interrupted, and this time there was a desperate urgency in her voice. "I'm not asking for— Grace, I can work, I can clean, I can do anything, but please don't throw it away. I saw what you throw out. There's good food that's just left over, untouched. Please, sir, just save it for me. I'll come back tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, whenever you can save it. It doesn't have to be every day, just when you can." John ran his hand over his face, visibly disturbed. He had seen poverty before, of course. He had grown up in a working-class neighborhood on the outskirts of Lyon before, getting his culinary training. But there was something in the desperate dignity of that woman that touched him deeply. "Wait here," he finally said. "Don't touch anything. I'll be right back." He disappeared through the door, leaving Sarah alone in the alley. She leaned against the cold wall, her legs trembling. She didn't know if it was from the cold fear or relief that he hadn't simply chased her away. Inside the restaurant, Chef John crossed the still warm, steamy kitchen, passing by the sous chefs who were cleaning the stainless steel counters, and quickly climbed the stairs to the second floor, where the administrative office was located. He knocked urgently on the mahogany door. "Come in," came the response from inside, a deep, controlled male voice. John opened the door and found David Anderson sitting behind a huge dark wood desk, still impeccably dressed in a charcoal grey suit even at that hour of the night. The man was 38, though some said he looked younger due to his almost obsessive attention to appearance. Tall, at 6 feet 1 inch, with broad shoulders that perfectly filled the tailored cut of his suit, David had the kind of presence that made people straighten up automatically when he entered a room. His eyes were a dark brown that appeared black under certain lights, framed by thick, expressive eyebrows that rarely revealed what he was truly thinking. His face was angular, with a strong jaw that he kept well-shaven, and a straight nose that gave an aristocratic air to his features. His black hair was slicked back with subtle gel, a few rebellious strands threatening to fall over his forehead after a long day. David was known in New York City as one of the most successful entrepreneurs in the culinary industry. At 25, he had inherited 3 mid-range restaurants from his father, who had just passed away from a sudden heart attack, an inheritance that came with considerable doubts and a letter left to be opened after his death. In that letter, his father had written with almost casual cruelty that he never believed David had the grit for business, that he was too sensitive, too much of a dreamer for the brutal world of corporate gastronomy. Those words had become fuel. In 13 years, David not only saved the 3 restaurants from bankruptcy, but expanded his empire to 17 establishments spread across New York City, Los Angeles, and Chicago. Each one was a masterpiece of concept and execution, each one a middle finger raised to the ghost of a father who never believed in him. But success had its price. David rarely smiled genuinely. He trusted very few people, and he had turned absolute control over every aspect of his life into a form of art. "What is it, John?" David asked without looking up from the financial spreadsheet he was analyzing on the computer. "Any problems in the kitchen?" "There's a woman down there," John said, closing the door behind him. "In the back. She's pregnant, David, very pregnant, and she was asking for the food scraps." This made David look up. "Asking. Begging," John corrected, the weight of the word hanging in the air. "She said she saw us throwing away food in the past weeks. She wants me to save the scraps for her. She even offered to work in exchange." David leaned back in his chair, fingers interlacing under his chin. For a long moment, he remained silent. That calculated silence he used in negotiations when processing information and deciding his next move. "Call security to take her to a shelter," he finally said, returning his attention to the computer, "and leave some take-out meals with her. We can't let a pregnant woman go hungry." "David," John hesitated, "I think you should talk to her." "Why?" The question was direct, emotionless. "Because..." The chef searched for the right words. "There's something about her. She's not a drug addict. She's not someone who has given up. She's fighting, David. You can see it in her eyes. And she's asking for a chance to work, not a handout." David sighed, that contained sigh of someone being pulled away from something important. But something in John's insistence, a man who rarely asked for favors or interfered in administrative matters, made him stand up. "All right," he said, adjusting the cuffs of his shirt. "I'll talk to her, but prepare a proper meal in the meantime. If she's in this state, she clearly hasn't been eating well." The two men descended the stairs, David adjusting his jacket with an automatic motion as he walked. When they reached the back door, John opened it and gestured to Sarah, who was still leaning against the wall, hugging herself. "Miss, my boss would like to speak with you," he said gently. Sarah looked up, and that was when she saw David Anderson for the first time. He stood in the doorway, tall and imposing, the elegant suit absurdly contrasting with the dirty alley scene. The dim light coming from inside the restaurant created an almost unreal silhouette around him. But it was his eyes that caught her off guard. Dark, analytical eyes that scanned her from head to toe in less than 3 seconds, cataloguing every detail like a human scanner. Sarah felt the urge to shrink away, to disappear. She knew how she must look, a wet and desperate disaster. But something in her, that stubborn dignity that refused to die completely, made her lift her chin and hold his gaze. "Come in," David said, his deep voice cutting through the sound of the rain. "It's cold, and you're soaked." It wasn't an invitation. It was an order, but said in a way that brooked no discussion. Sarah hesitated for just a second before following John inside the restaurant. They led her through the industrial kitchen, where the staff paused to watch with curiosity. Sarah kept her eyes down, aware of the water dripping from her, leaving a trail on the clean floor. They climbed a staircase and entered an office that looked like it came straight out of a decor magazine. Everything in it screamed money and good taste. David gestured to a leather chair in front of the desk. "Sit down." Sarah obeyed, feeling completely out of place in that environment. She left a damp stain on the expensive leather of the chair. David didn't sit. Instead, he stood by the edge of the desk, arms crossed, studying her with that disturbing intensity. "What's your name?" was his first question. Sarah Johnson." "Sarah," he repeated, as if testing the name. "John told me you were asking for leftovers. How long have you been coming here?" Shame burned Sarah's face, but she forced herself to answer. 3 weeks, But I never took anything without asking. I saw that you throw away so much good food, and I thought maybe. When was the last time you had a proper meal? David interrupted, getting straight to the point. Sarah blinked, surprised by the question. The day before yesterday, I got a cleaning job, cleaning an apartment. The lady gave me lunch. And before that? 2 days before. David nodded slowly, processing. How many months along are you? 6. Are you getting prenatal care? Sarah's hesitation was answer enough. David closed his eyes for a brief moment, and when he opened them again, there was something different in them. Not exactly compassion, but a calculated determination. All right, he said, pushing himself away from the desk and walking to the window that overlooked the busy street below. I'm going to make you an offer, Sarah, and I want you to think carefully before you respond. He turned to face her again, hands in his pants pockets, relaxed posture but serious face. I have a house on the Upper East Side, a large house, 3 stories, that stays empty most of the time because I rarely go there. I sleep in the apartments near the restaurants, depending on where I need to be the next day. This house needs someone to take care of it, someone to keep it clean, receive deliveries, prepare meals on the rare occasions when I show up. Sarah watched him cautiously, not understanding where he was going with this. I'm offering you a job, David continued. Housing in the house, 3 meals a day, real nutritious food, not leftovers. A full health plan for prenatal care and childbirth. A monthly salary of $3,000. Sarah's breath caught. It was impossible. It was too good to be true. But, David raised a finger, there are conditions. The agreement ends 2 months after the baby is born. Enough time for you to recover and get organized to move on with your life. During that time, you won't interfere in my personal or professional matters. We maintain a strictly professional relationship, and more importantly, you agree to proper medical supervision immediately. Sarah opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Why? Why would you do this? David shrugged, a response that wasn't really a response. Because my house needs someone, and you need a place. It's a transaction, not charity. You'll work for it. But I don't understand. You don't know me. I could be anyone. I could steal. You could, David agreed calmly. But you won't. I'm very good at reading people, Sarah. It comes with the territory of running 17 restaurants and dealing with hundreds of employees. You're not here out of laziness or addiction. You're here because life dealt you a blow, and you're fighting to get back up. I recognize that. He stepped back behind the desk, opened a drawer, and took out a folder. I'll prepare a contract detailing all the terms. You can have a few days to think. I accept, Sarah interrupted, the words coming out before she could stop herself. David raised an eyebrow. You don't want to think it over? I don't need to, she said, and for the first time in months there was something like hope in her voice. I accept. What you're offering it's more than I could ask for. It's more than I deserve. Everyone deserves the basics to survive, David said simply. And a pregnant woman deserves more than the basics. He glanced at his watch. It's late. John will prepare something for you to eat now, and I'll ask my driver to take you to a decent hotel tonight. Tomorrow morning, we'll arrange the move, and you'll see the house. Leave your phone number. Do you have a phone? Sarah shook her head. Then we'll arrange that tomorrow too, David said, making a note. John will stay with you while I sort out some details. Sarah got up from the chair, her legs still shaky. Mr. Anderson, I don't know how to thank you. You don't need to thank me. As I said, it's a transaction. But there was something in the way he said it, a slight softening in his rigid tone that suggested it might not be that simple. As John led her back to the kitchen, Sarah allowed herself, for the first time in months, to breathe a little deeper. Outside, the rain still poured heavily over New York City, but inside her a small flame of hope began to shine again. And in the office, David stood by the window for a long time after she left, watching the rain, asking himself, even because what the hell had he just done? He never mixed emotion with business. Never. But there was something about that woman, the way she lifted her chin even when completely shattered, the desperate dignity in her eyes, the refusal to accept charity when she offered work in return. That touched something he thought he had buried long ago. "It will be just temporary," he murmured to himself. "Just a work agreement. Simple as that." But even as he said it, a part of him, the part he had learned to silence to survive, whispered that nothing involving Sarah Johnson would be simple. Nothing at all. The July morning sun streamed through the enormous windows of the townhouse in the Upper East Side, creating patterns of golden light on the light wood floor that seemed never to have been stepped on. Sarah stood in the entrance hall, her old backpack at her feet, looking around with a mix of admiration and discomfort that made her stomach churn. The house was immaculate, frighteningly immaculate. Immaculate white walls, designer furniture she had only seen in magazines in waiting rooms, a spiral staircase elegantly leading to the upper floors. But there was something unsettling about that perfection, the complete absence of life. No photos on the walls, no forgotten books on the coffee table, no glass left in the sink. It was as if the house were a museum exhibit, not a home. "The kitchen is this way," said Lisa, the woman in her 50s that David had sent to show the house to Sarah. She was the administrative manager of the restaurants, an elegant lady with grey hair neatly tied in a perfect bun, wearing a navy blue pantsuit and blazer. Her tone was professional, but not exactly warm. "Mr. Anderson equipped everything with the best appliances. You will find everything you need." Sarah followed Lisa through a living room that could easily fit 3 times the shack where she grew up, passing through a dining room with a glass table for 12, until they reached a kitchen that took her breath away. It was larger than some apartments she had cleaned as a housekeeper. Marble countertops, white cabinets reaching the ceiling, a central island with an induction cooktop, built-in electric oven, stainless steel side-by-side refrigerator, and a climate-controlled wine cellar that took up an entire wall. Everything gleaming, everything new, everything absolutely intimidating. "Mr. Anderson left instructions for the refrigerator and pantry to be fully stocked," Lisa continued, opening the enormous fridge. Sarah saw shelves filled with fresh fruits, vegetables, meats, dairy, and juices. "You can cook whatever you want, whenever you want. He rarely gives notice when he comes, so the guidance is to always keep something fresh available." "I understand," Sarah murmured, still processing everything. Lisa guided her back to the hall and ascended the staircase. The first floor had 4 suites, each larger than the last, all decorated with the same sophisticated and cold minimalism. The second floor had 3 more suites and a locked office. "This is Mr. Anderson's home office," Lisa said, pointing to the dark wood door. "You should not enter there. He has confidential documents and prefers to keep it private." "Of course," Sarah quickly agreed. They went back down and Lisa led her to a discreet door under the stairs that Sarah hadn't even noticed before. Upon opening it, it revealed a narrower staircase leading down. "Your quarters are here," Lisa said, and there was something in her tone, not exactly disdain, but a clear demarcation of territories. The maid's room in the basement was small, especially compared to the extravagant suites on the upper floors. It was perhaps about 15 square meters, with a single bed, a built-in closet, a simple desk, and a tiny attached bathroom. A high window near the ceiling let in only a sliver of natural light. But for Sarah, used to sleeping in Cheap hostels or on park benches when money ran out, this was a palace. "Towels and linens are in the closet," Lisa said, checking something on her clipboard. "Mr. Anderson also arranged for some clothes for you. He estimated your size based on how he saw you yesterday." Sarah opened the closet and found several new pieces still with tags. Maternity pants, comfortable tops, a soft robe, even a suitable winter coat. Tears burned in her eyes. "He didn't have to," she started. "Mr. Anderson is very attentive to details," Lisa interrupted, her tone neutral. "He also scheduled your first prenatal appointment for tomorrow at 9 in the morning. A driver will pick you up at 8:30. The health insurance card is here." She handed Sarah an envelope containing the card and some documents. "Your duties are simple," Lisa continued, switching to instruction mode. "Keep the house clean and organized. Prepare meals when Mr. Anderson is here. He usually gives a few hours' notice, rarely shows up unannounced. Receive deliveries and direct them appropriately. You will have Sundays off, and if you need to leave during the week for appointments or other commitments, just give advance notice." Sarah nodded, trying to absorb all the information. "And Sarah," Lisa said, stopping at the door, her face taking on a more serious expression, "Mr. Anderson is a very private man. He values his privacy above all. Do not ask questions about his personal life. Do not comment on his comings and goings, and most importantly, keep your distance. He is helping you, yes, but that does not mean you are friends or that you have any special access to him. Understood?" There was a warning there, clear as crystal. Sarah felt her cheeks flush, but kept her voice steady. "I understand perfectly. I am just an employee." "Exactly," Lisa said, seeming satisfied. "So we won't have any problems. If you have any questions, my number is in the envelope along with other important contacts. Welcome." With that, Lisa ascended the narrow staircase and left, leaving Sarah alone in her new room. Sarah slowly sat on the bed, testing the mattress. It was firm, yet comfortable. More comfortable than anywhere she had slept in the last 3 months. She lay on her back, one hand resting on her belly where the baby moved gently, and finally let the tears fall. They were tears of relief, gratitude, but also fear. Fear that this was too good to last. Fear of doing something wrong and losing everything. Fear that her ex-partner could still find her even here. Fear of not being able to maintain the emotional distance necessary from a man who, with a simple gesture, had completely changed her life. "We're going to be okay," she whispered to the baby, trying to convince herself. "Everything will be all right this time. It will." 2 weeks passed in a strange and lonely routine. Sarah woke up early, went up to the huge kitchen, and prepared her morning coffee, still getting used to the abundance of food available. In the first few days, she ate with guilt, as if she were stealing, but gradually she relaxed. She cleaned the house every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, although honestly there wasn't much to clean, since no one was making a mess. She spent her afternoons reading books she found on a shelf in the living room, Brazilian classics, some foreign novels, management and culinary books. She discovered that David had an impressive collection, although from the fine layer of dust on the spines, he rarely touched them. David hadn't shown up even once. He communicated only through short, direct text messages via the new phone he provided for her. "I need financial reports that are in the right drawer of the master suite desk. They can be picked up today at 2 p.m. Investor group is coming for dinner Thursday at 8 p.m. Menu: light appetizer, main course with meat, dessert. John will send ingredients and recipes. Renovation at the restaurant in West Village is delayed. I won't be around for the next few days." Sarah always responded equally briefly. "Yes, sir." "Understood. No problem." The prenatal appointment had been intense. The doctor, Dr. Emily Roberts, a young and competent woman at New York Presbyterian Hospital, looked visibly concerned when examining her. "Sarah, you are severely malnourished," she said bluntly, looking at the test results. "Your anemia is at a concerning level. The baby is a bit below the expected weight for 6 months. We need to reverse this immediately." She prescribed vitamins, iron supplements, a rich and balanced diet, and scheduled weekly follow-up appointments. "I want to see you gaining at least a pound a week for the next 3 weeks, doctor," Emily said firmly. "No skipping meals, no not being hungry. You are eating for 2 and your body needs to recover." Sarah left with a bag full of prescriptions and a detailed meal plan. David's driver, a calm gentleman named Mr. Thompson, took her to a pharmacy where she was shocked to see the price of the supplements, but the corporate credit card that Lisa had left with her covered everything without issues. "Mr. David left instructions for you to use this card for anything related to health and the house," Mr. Thompson explained when he saw her. Hesitation. "You don't need to ask for permission, miss. That's what it's for." That night, Sarah sent a message to David. "I went to the appointment. The doctor prescribed supplements and a special diet. I used the corporate card. Total, $2,847. Sorry for the high amount." The response came almost instantly. "You don't need to apologize. That's what the card is for. Follow the medical advice closely. How are you feeling?" Sarah blinked, surprised by the question. It was the first somewhat personal thing he had said. "Better. The house is very comfortable, thank you." She stared at the screen for minutes, waiting for a response, but nothing came, so she put the phone away and went down to her room, that strange feeling of loneliness tightening her chest again. It was on a Thursday, 19 days after Sarah moved in, that David appeared for the first time. Sarah was in the kitchen. It was almost 10 at night, preparing chamomile tea before bed. She was wearing one of the new nightgowns he had bought, a robe over it, and fluffy slippers. Her hair was loose, still damp from the shower, falling in waves over her shoulders. She was humming, softly, a habit she had picked up again in the last few weeks, now that she felt safe, when she heard the front door open. Her heart raced. There was supposed to be no one there. David always gave notice. She grabbed a kitchen knife, her hands trembling, and cautiously approached the kitchen door that led to the hall. "Sarah?" David's deep voice echoed. "It's me. Sorry for not giving notice." Sarah exhaled the breath she had been holding and placed the knife on the counter. She adjusted her robe and stepped out of the kitchen. David was standing in the hall, a small suitcase at his feet, his suit wrinkled, tie loosened, and for the first time since she met him, he looked tired, deeply tired. There were shadows under his dark eyes, and he had stubble, something she imagined was rare for him. "Mr. Anderson," she said, unsure, "is everything okay?" He ran a hand through his hair, messing it up even more. "Long day, very long. Sorry for showing up like this without notice. I was at the restaurant in West Village, and there was an incident. An important client had food poisoning. We spent the whole day dealing with lawyers, health department, press. My apartment nearby is under renovation, and I didn't want to go to any of the others. I just needed silence." It was the longest sentence he had ever said to her. Sarah noticed the tension in his shoulders, the way he pinched the bridge of his nose as if he had a terrible headache. "Did you eat anything?" she asked before thinking. David lowered his hand and looked at her, surprised by the question. "No, I didn't have time." "I can prepare something. I have a soup that... This afternoon, I made it. It's still warm, and I can make a sandwich, or..." "Soup is great," he gently interrupted. "Thank you, Sarah." He went upstairs with the suitcase, and Sarah rushed back to the kitchen, suddenly nervous. It was the first time she would really cook for him, not just following recipes that John Smith sent for formal dinners. She heated the chicken and vegetable soup, sliced fresh Italian bread she had bought in the morning, and prepared a nice tray with a deep bowl, silver spoon, cloth napkin, and a glass of fresh orange juice. 15 minutes later, David, who came down. He had changed from his suit into grey sweatpants and a simple black t-shirt. Seeing him like this, without the armor of the impeccable suit, without perfectly styled hair, was different. He looked more human, more approachable, even younger. "I put the soup in the dining room," Sarah said, drying her hands on a dish towel. "Aren't you going to eat?" he asked, surprising her again. "I already had dinner earlier." "But you were making tea when I arrived," he pointed out, looking at the abandoned cup on the counter. "Sit with me, I don't like eating alone." It was a request, not an order, but there was something in his tone, perhaps the raw exhaustion in his voice, that made Sarah nod. They sat at the large glass table, she with her tea, he with the soup. The initial silence was uncomfortable, broken only by the sound of David's spoon against the bowl. "It's delicious," he said, after the third spoonful. "Did you make it from scratch?" "Yes. I learned from my mother. She always said that good soup cures any ailment." Sarah smiled at the memory, a small and sad smile. "Your mother? Is she—" David left the question hanging. "She died when I was 17. Breast cancer. It was quick." Sarah stirred her tea, watching the chamomile leaves swirl. "My father died when I was a child, work accident. So after her, it was just me and my older sister. Carla raised us. Well, she finished raising me." David nodded slowly. "Does your sister know where you are?" Sarah tensed. "No, no one knows, and it needs to stay that way." She expected him to press, to ask questions, but David simply agreed. "I understand. We all have the right to start over without explanations." There was something in the way he said that made Sarah look at him more closely. "Are you starting over too?" David laughed, but it was a sound without humor. "No, I just never stopped to really start." He finished the soup and leaned back in his chair, his eyes studying her with that unsettling intensity. "How have these weeks been? The house is very quiet, I imagine." "It is," Sarah admitted, "but it's a good silence, a safe silence. I haven't had that in a long time." "Safe from what?" The question slipped out before he could contain it, and Sarah saw the exact moment he realized he had crossed the line that Carla had drawn so clearly. "I'm sorry. It's none of my business." "No, it's fine," Sarah said, surprising herself. Maybe it was the late hour, or the fact that he seemed so exhausted and human, or simply because she was tired of carrying everything alone. Safe from the baby's father. He is violent, controlling. It took me a long time to see it because he was smart. He didn't leave visible marks, you know? It was more psychological. He isolated me from everyone, made me believe I was crazy, that I was worth nothing without him. David's jaw tightened. "And when did you find out about the pregnancy?" "That was the last straw. He wanted me to have an abortion. He said he wasn't ready to be a father, that a baby would ruin his plans. When I refused, he hit me for the first time for real, in the face where everyone could see. That's when I woke up, when I realized that if I stayed, he would eventually kill me, or kill the baby." Her hands instinctively went to her belly. "So I gathered the little money I had hidden, waited for him to leave for work, and I left. I bought a one-way ticket to New York City because it's big enough for me to get lost." David was completely still, his eyes fixed on her. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower, more controlled, as if he were holding back something dangerous. "Does he know you're here, in New York City?" "I don't know. I hope not. But he has money, he has connections. If he wants to find me..." She swallowed hard. "That's why I can't use my name for anything official. That's why I'm afraid to go to hospitals, to register for anything. He can track me." David was silent for a long moment, his fingers drumming on the table, clearly thinking. Finally, he stood up. "I'll take care of this." "What?" Sarah looked at him, confused. "The trail, the records. I have lawyers who can create a layer of protection on your medical documents, make it practically impossible to trace you through the healthcare system. I can also arrange for additional security measures for the house, better cameras, alarms." "Mr. Anderson," Sarah interrupted, standing up as well. "This is too much. You've already done so much. I can't ask." "You're not asking, I'm offering." He looked at her, and there was a steely determination in those dark eyes. "Sarah, you're under my roof. That puts you under my responsibility, and I won't allow people under my responsibility to be in danger. It's that simple." It wasn't simple. Sarah could see that in the way he leaned on the table, the knuckles of his fingers white from so much strength. There was something more there, something he wasn't saying. "Why?" she asked softly. "Why are you doing all this for me? Don't tell me it's just because your house needed someone. We both know that's not true." David opened his mouth to respond, closed it, turned his back to her. When he finally spoke, his voice was tense. "Because I've seen what happens when no one helps. Because I've lost someone who was in a similar situation, and I did nothing." He took a deep breath. "My mother. She stayed with my father for years, even though he was difficult, violent when he drank. The whole family knew, but no one did anything because it was a couple's problem, because she chose to stay. When she finally gathered the courage to leave, it was too late. She had a stroke. The doctor said it was due to chronic stress, constant violence. She was only 43. Sarah felt tears sting her eyes. "David." It was the first time she used his first name. He turned to look at her, and for the first time she saw something beyond the controlled mask. Pain. Raw, ancient pain. "I was 16, he continued, "and I did nothing. I thought it wasn't my place to intervene between my parents. So when I saw you in that alley, drenched, pregnant, desperate," he shook his head, "I wasn't going to make the same mistake twice." The silence that followed was thick with emotion. Sarah slowly moved closer, and before she could think better of it, she placed a hand on his arm. "You are not responsible for what happened to your mother," she said softly. "You were a child. Child or not, I knew, and I did nothing. And now you are doing something. For me, for my baby." Sarah squeezed his arm. "That counts. That matters." David looked at her hand on his arm, then at her face. Something passed between them in that moment, an understanding, a connection that went beyond employer and employee. He gently pulled away, the mask returning to place. "It's late. You should rest." "You too," Sarah said. He nodded, taking the empty tray. "I'll take this to the kitchen." "You don't have to, Sarah," he interrupted, a hint of humor returning to his voice. "I run restaurants. I know how to wash a dish." She smiled, and he smiled back. The first genuine smile she had seen from him. It completely transformed his face, softening the hard lines, making his eyes shine. Then he left the dining room, leaving Sarah alone with a racing heart and the unsettling feeling that the carefully drawn lines between them had just become much more blurred, and she wasn't sure if that was a good thing or dangerous. Perhaps it was both. The days that followed that night brought a subtle but undeniable change in the dynamic between Sarah and David. He didn't spend the night at the house again, but he started showing up more frequently, always at unexpected times, always with some work-related excuse. "I need some documents from the office," he would say, appearing at 3 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. "I have an important video conference, and the internet at my apartment is unstable," was the excuse on a Thursday morning. "I forgot some contracts here," he claimed on a rainy Saturday. Sarah wasn't foolish. She realized that the excuses were exactly that, excuses. But she didn't comment on it, just nodded when he arrived, offered coffee or something to eat, and returned to her activities. August arrived, bringing that typical dry cold of New York City when the sky turns a crystal blue and the air cuts the skin like a blade. Sarah was almost 7 months pregnant now, her belly prominent under the comfortable dresses she had bought. Dr. Emily was pleased with her progress. She had gained 5 pounds. Her anemia was under control, and the baby was finally at the right weight for the gestational age. "You're doing an excellent job," the doctor said during a Monday appointment. "I want you to keep it up. And Sarah, have you thought about the delivery? Do you prefer natural or cesarean?" Sarah hesitated. "Natural, I think, if possible. My mother always said it was best for the baby." "I agree. And do you have someone to be your support person during delivery? By law, you have the right to have someone of your choice in the room." Sarah bit her lip. Her sister Carla didn't know where she was. She had no friends in New York City. The only person she could ask would be, "I haven't decided yet," she replied, avoiding the question. But the doctor didn't let it go. "Sarah, the support person is important. Someone to give you emotional support, to advocate for your interests, if you can't speak for yourself. Please think carefully about it, okay?" On the way home, Sarah stared out the car window while Mr. Thompson drove, thinking, would it be too absurd to ask David? He was already doing so much. He had crossed so many lines he initially set. Asking him to be present at the most vulnerable and intimate moment of her life would be asking too much. But a part of her, the part that had grown accustomed to his constant presence, to the coffees they shared when he showed up, to the conversations that lingered, even when there was no reason for him to stay, that part wanted it to be him. "We're here, Miss Johnson," Mr. Thompson announced, pulling her from her thoughts. She thanked him and entered the house, surprised to see David's car parked in the garage. He rarely came on Mondays. She found him in the living room, sitting on the white leather sofa with his laptop on his lap, the reading glasses he rarely wore in public resting on his nose. He was wearing jeans, and a light blue shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows. Seeing David Anderson in casual clothes was still surprising to her. "Hi," she said, dropping her bag at the entrance. "I didn't know you were coming today." He took off his glasses, rubbing his tired eyes. "The meeting I had was cancelled at the last minute. I decided to work from home." He paused, then added, "From this house." Sarah smiled. "I understand. I'll prepare lunch. Have you eaten yet?" "Not yet. And before you ask, yes, I'm hungry." She laughed and went to the kitchen. In recent days she had discovered that cooking for David was, strangely, enjoyable. He was not just polite. He genuinely appreciated good food, commenting on spices and techniques, asking for recipes. It was different from cooking for Mark, her ex, who ate mechanically while scrolling on his phone, rarely acknowledging the effort. She prepared a mushroom risotto with grilled asparagus, something she had learned by watching videos on YouTube during lazy afternoons. The kitchen filled with the aroma of garlic, butter, and white wine. 40 minutes later, she called him to the table. David appeared, inhaling deeply. "That smells incredible," he said, sitting down. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes until David spoke. "How was the appointment?" Sarah had gotten used to these questions. At first, they surprised her, an employer interested in the medical details of his temporary employee, but now she recognized it as genuine concern. "Good. The baby is great. Growing just fine." She hesitated, then decided to share. "The doctor asked if I had chosen a birthing partner." David paused with his fork in midair. "And do you?" "No. My sister doesn't know where I am, and I don't have anyone else." The silence that followed was thick. David carefully placed his fork on the plate, his movements measured. "I could," he finally said, his voice low. "If you want. If you don't have anyone else." Sarah stared at him, her heart racing. "David, you don't have to." I know I don't have to. I'm offering because I want to. He looked her directly in the eyes. Unless that makes you uncomfortable, I would understand. No, Sarah said quickly, perhaps too quickly. It doesn't make me uncomfortable. I just don't want you to feel obligated. I don't feel that way. He resumed eating, but she noticed a slight flush creeping up his neck. Then it settled. When the time comes, I'll be there. Sarah felt something warm spread through her chest. Gratitude, relief, and something more that she didn't want to name. A week later, on a Wednesday night, Sarah was in the living room reading a book of short stories by Emily Dickinson when the doorbell rang. It was almost 9 o'clock. She wasn't expecting anyone. Through the intercom, she saw an elegant woman at the entrance of the apartment building. Straight blonde hair perfectly falling over a beige blazer, impeccable makeup even at that hour. Yes? Sarah answered cautiously. Hi, I'm Julia Thompson, a friend of David's. Is he home? Sarah furrowed her brow. David hadn't mentioned he would have visitors. He's not here at the moment. Oh. The woman seemed genuinely disappointed. What a shame. I was in the area and thought I'd surprise him. You're the new housekeeper. There was something in her tone, not exactly rude but condescending, that made Sarah stiffen. I'm the person who takes care of the house, yes. I see. Well, when he gets back, could you let him know I stopped by? I'm Julia. He has my number? Sure. Sarah hung up the intercom, a strange discomfort settling in her stomach. She had no right to feel jealous. She and David were nothing more than employer and employee. The fact that he had offered to be her birthing partner meant nothing more than kindness, but when David appeared an hour later, she couldn't help but mention it. A woman named Julia stopped by. She said she was your friend. David stopped taking off his blazer, his face becoming impassive. Julia Thompson. I didn't ask her last name, but she said you have her number. I do. He hung the blazer with more force than necessary. What did she want? She didn't say. Just asked me to let you know she stopped by. David ran a hand through his hair, visibly irritated. Great. Wonderful. Sarah bit her lip, curiosity overcoming discretion. Is she a close friend? She was my fiancée, David said bluntly. 6 years ago. The wedding that didn't happen that I mentioned. Sarah felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. Oh. She broke up with me 3 days before the wedding, he continued, his voice growing harder with each word. Ran off. With my best friend, or who I thought was my best friend. She took confidential company documents with her, information she only had access to because I trusted her completely. Their family opened a competing restaurant 6 months later, using exactly the same strategies, the same suppliers, even the same dishes I was planning to launch. He walked to the window, hands in pockets, posture tense. It took me years to get over that, or rather, to learn not to trust anyone like that again. And now, suddenly, she reappears. It started about 2 months ago. Calls, messages, showing up at restaurants, saying she made a mistake, that she was confused, that she still feels something. And you? Sarah asked before thinking. Do you still feel something? David turned to look at her, and there was something fierce in his eyes. Nothing. I feel absolutely nothing for her, except contempt for what she did. He took a few steps toward her. But she doesn't accept that. She keeps insisting, showing up, as if time could erase what she did. Sarah swallowed hard, the intensity of his gaze leaving her breathless. You should make it clear to her that there's no chance, she said softly, that you've moved on. I've made it clear, multiple times. He sighed, the weariness returning to his features. But she's persistent. She always has been. Sarah wanted to say more, wanted to ask more, but the doorbell rang again. She checked the intercom, and her blood ran cold. It was Julia again, but this time she wasn't alone. There was a man with her, tall, handsome, wearing an expensive suit. "David, I know you're in there." Julia's voice echoed through the intercom. "I saw your car. Please, just give me 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes." David moved closer, seeing who was there. His face closed completely. "It's Peter, too," he said, his voice dangerously low. "The ex-best friend." Sarah saw the anger contained in the way he clenched his fists. Instinctively, she placed a hand on his arm. "You don't have to open," she said. "You can just ignore it." David looked at her hand on his arm, then at her. "No, it's time to put an end to this once and for all." He grabbed the intercom. "I'm going downstairs, but you all stay out." He left the house, and Sarah watched from the living room window that faced the entrance. She saw the silhouettes of the three at the garden gate, but she couldn't hear what they were saying. The conversation lasted maybe 10 minutes. Sarah saw Julia gesturing dramatically, saw Peter try to put his hand on David's shoulder, which he jerked away from abruptly. She saw David speak, his posture rigid and inflexible. Finally, she saw the couple leave, Julia looking back several times. When David returned inside, his face was flushed with contained anger. "They want me to invest in their new restaurant," he said, his voice trembling. "With fury. They had the audacity to come here to my house and ask me for money, saying that water under the bridge doesn't move the mill, that enough time has passed, that it would be a great business opportunity." He punched the wall, and Sarah jumped, startled, but not out of fear of him. She recognized the difference between explosive anger and controlled rage. David was furious, but he would never hurt her. "David," she said calmly, approaching him, "breathe. They're gone." 6 years, he continued, as if he hadn't heard her. 6 years, and they think they can just show up and... He stopped, breathing heavily. Sarah did the only thing she could think of. She hugged him. It was impulsive, probably inappropriate, but she didn't think. She just wrapped her arms around him, her belly between them making the hug a bit awkward, and held on. David stiffened for a second, too. Then, slowly, his arms wrapped around her too. He was much taller than her, so his chin rested on the top of her head. "You deserve more," Sarah murmured against his chest. "People who value you, who don't use you." She felt the tension start to leave his body, his shoulders gradually relaxing. "Thank you," he said quietly, the words reverberating in his chest. They stayed like that longer than strictly necessary. When they finally separated, there was a flush on both their cheeks. "I'm sorry," David said, running a hand over his face. "You shouldn't have to deal with this." "It's okay. We all have our demons." Sarah took a step back, creating safe distance again. "Do you want me to prepare something? Tea? Coffee?" "Actually," he looked at the clock, "I know it's late, but would you be up for watching a movie? Something silly and mindless just to forget?" Sarah blinked, surprised. "A movie? If you're too tired, I understand." "No, I'm not. A movie would be great." They settled in the TV room that Sarah rarely used, a room with a huge screen and sofas so comfortable they felt like clouds. David chose a silly comedy, something about a bumbling secret agent, and sat at one end of the sofa. Sarah settled at the other end, a respectful distance between them. But as the movie progressed, as the tension of the night dissipated, they relaxed. They laughed, together at the silly jokes. They commented on the absurd scenes, and at some point Sarah found herself resting her head on his shoulder, and David with his arm around her. Neither of them commented on it. Neither of them moved away. When the movie ended, it was already past midnight. Sarah was almost falling asleep, the warmth of his body, the safety of being near him making her drowsy. "Sarah," David whispered, "you should go to bed." she murmured, not moving. He chuckled softly, and it was such a rare and beautiful sound that she wanted to capture it forever. "Come on," he said, getting up and offering his hand. "I'll walk you to your room." She took his hand, letting him pull her up from the sofa. The belly made the movement a bit awkward, and he held her by the arm to ensure she didn't lose her balance. They went down the narrow stairs leading to the basement together. When they reached her bedroom door, Sarah turned to face him. "Thank you," she said, "for trusting me, with the story about Julia and everything." "Thank you for being here," he replied, "for not leaving me alone tonight." They stood there in the narrow hallway, too close, looking into each other's eyes. Sarah saw when David's eyes briefly dropped to her lips, saw the internal struggle happening on his face, but then he took a step back. "Good night, Sarah." "Good night, David." She entered her room and closed the door, leaning against it, her heart pounding in her chest. Outside, David stood still for a long moment before going back up the stairs, wondering when exactly he had lost control of the situation, when exactly Sarah had stopped being just his temporary employee and become the person he most wanted to see when he got home, when exactly he had started to fall in love. In the following days, there was a kind of careful dance between them. They talked, shared meals, watched TV together some nights, but they always maintained that careful distance, always aware of the thin line they shouldn't cross. Until one Friday morning, Sarah woke up feeling something different. It wasn't pain exactly. It was more of a pressure, a discomfort in her lower back that hadn't been there before. She got up slowly, feeling strange. Probably just slept wrong, she told herself. But when she went up to the kitchen and started preparing breakfast, the pressure increased. And then, without warning, Sarah felt something warm trickling down her legs. She looked down and saw the puddle of water on the floor. "No," she whispered, panic rising. "No, not yet. There are still 6 weeks to go." With trembling hands, she grabbed the phone and dialed the only number that mattered at that moment. David answered on the second ring. "Sarah, is everything—" "My water broke," she said, her voice rising an octave. "David, my water broke. It's too early. The baby shouldn't be coming now. Breathe." His voice immediately became calm, that forced calm of someone entering crisis mode. "Where are you?" "In the kitchen. I was making coffee and—" "Are you feeling contractions?" I don't know. Maybe. There's pressure and—" She groaned as a sharp pain cut through her abdomen. Yes, it hurts." "Okay, don't move. I'm leaving the restaurant now. I'll pick you up in 15 minutes. Call Dr. Emily and let her know we're heading to the hospital." "David, I'm scared," she admitted, tears starting to fall. "I know, but you're going to be okay. The baby will be okay. I'm on my way, all right? Hang in there with me." He hung up, and Sarah heard the sound of doors slamming, the engine starting, even before the call disconnected. She called Dr. Emily with trembling fingers, explained the situation. The doctor, always so calm, turned serious. "Sarah, 34 weeks is premature but manageable. I'll meet you at the hospital. I'll notify the neonatology team. Everything will be fine." But Sarah wasn't sure of anything as she carefully sat in the kitchen chair, a protective hand over her belly, timing the contractions that were coming faster and faster. 12 minutes later, she counted every second. She heard David's car screeching to a halt in the driveway. He burst through the front door like a hurricane, his blazer open, tie askew, eyes wide, searching for her. "Sarah! Here!" she called from the kitchen. He appeared in the doorway, saw the puddle of liquid on the floor, saw her pale face, and something in him softened. "Come on," he said, stepping closer and offering his hands. "Let's get you to the hospital." He helped her up, grabbed the bag she had packed weeks ago, always the pessimistic planner, and carefully guided her to the car. On the way to the hospital, with David driving well above the speed limit, Sarah felt another strong contraction and groaned, gripping the door handle. "How far apart are the contractions?" David asked, his eyes alternating between her and the road. 5 minutes, maybe less. She breathed through the pain. "This is happening too fast. We're almost there. Just 5 more minutes." He placed his hand over hers, intertwining their fingers, and Sarah clung to it as if it were a lifeline. "David," she said, when the contraction passed, "if something goes wrong, it's not going to. But if it does, I need you to know that these months have been the best I've had in years. You saved my life, my child's life." David squeezed her hand tighter, his jaw tense. "Nothing is going to go wrong. I won't allow it." And there was such fierce conviction in his voice that Sarah almost believed he could actually control it. They arrived at the hospital in record time. David stopped at the emergency entrance, not caring about the designated parking spots, and rushed to her, side, helping her out. "Premature labor," he shouted to the nurse at the reception. 34 weeks, water broken, contractions every 5 minutes. Immediately, a team appeared with a wheelchair. They placed Sarah in it and began rolling toward the obstetrics center. "Sir, the parking is—" the reception nurse started. "Later," David cut her off, following the wheelchair. "I'll take care of it later." And so, with David holding her hand and refusing to let go, even when the doctor said he would have to put on protective gear before entering the delivery room, Sarah entered the biggest battle of her life. The baby was determined to arrive 6 weeks early, and nothing, not even David Anderson's careful plans, could stop that. The delivery room at New York Presbyterian Hospital was a spacious, high-tech area filled with equipment that beeped constantly and lights that flashed in varying rhythms. Sarah lay on the gurney, wearing a light blue hospital gown, her hair pulled into a messy bun, her face glistening with sweat, even with the air conditioning on. "You're doing great, Sarah," Dr. Emily said, positioned at the foot of the gurney, checking her dilation for the 3rd time in 20 minutes. "You're already at 8 centimeters. For a first baby, you're progressing quickly." "Quickly is good, right?" Sarah asked between gasps, her hands gripping the rails of the gurney until her knuckles turned white. "In this case, yes. The faster, the less stress for the baby." David was by her side, wearing a green surgical gown over his wrinkled dress clothes, a cap covering his dark hair, a mask hanging from his chin. He had insisted on staying even when the doctor suggested it might be better for him to wait outside due to the potential complications of a premature birth. "I promised I'd be here," he said simply, his voice not allowing for discussion. "And I don't break promises." Now, he held Sarah's hand as she went through another devastating contraction. His fingers were probably turning purple from the strength with which she gripped them, but he didn't complain once. "Breathe, Sarah," he instructed gently, his deep voice a calming counterpoint to the pain that consumed her. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. 1, 2, 3, 4. Release. She followed his rhythm, her eyes locked on his like an anchor. "How do you know how to do this?" she managed to ask when the contraction passed, leaving her exhausted and trembling. "YouTube," he admitted, a hint of humor in his tone. "I've spent the last few weeks watching videos on how to be a good birth companion. There's a very informative nurse teaching breathing techniques. Sarah would have laughed if she weren't so exhausted. David Anderson, CEO of a culinary empire, watching YouTube videos about childbirth. The image was so incongruous that it almost seemed unreal. "Sarah," Dr. Emily called her attention, "I need to be honest with you about what's going to happen now. The baby is coming. There's no stopping it, but he will be born at 34 weeks, which means he will need to stay in the neonatal intensive care unit for a while, probably a few weeks, maybe a month, depending on how he adapts. There will be a neonatology team here to receive him immediately. Panic crossed Sarah's face. But will he be okay? He will. 34 weeks has a very good prognosis, the doctor reassured her. His lungs are already developed enough, especially with the steroid we administered when you arrived. He will just need extra help in the first days or weeks. That's normal and expected. Sarah nodded, but tears began to fall. David leaned in, gently wiping them away with his thumb. He's strong, David said with conviction. Look who his mother is. Of course he's strong. Another contraction hit, stronger than the previous ones, and Sarah screamed. A nurse appeared from the other side, placing a hand on her shoulder. You're almost there, dear. Just a little more. The next few minutes turned into a blur of pain, voices giving instructions, and David murmuring encouragements that she could barely process. Everything in her world narrowed down to the primal need, to bring that child into the world, no matter how much it hurt. Sarah, on the next contraction you're going to push, Dr. Emily instructed. Full force, like you're having a bowel movement. Got it? Yes, Sarah gasped. Here it comes, the doctor warned, monitoring the machines. Now, Sarah, push. Sarah took a breath and pushed with everything she had, a scream tearing from her throat. David held one of her hands and supported her back with the other, sustaining her. That's it, just like that, Dr. Emily encouraged. A little more. I can't, Sarah cried as the contraction passed. I can't do this anymore. Yes, you can, David said firmly, turning her face to meet his. Look at me, Sarah. You're the strongest woman I know. You've survived things that would have destroyed weaker people. You can do this too. One more time, just one more time. There was such absolute certainty in his dark eyes that Sarah believed him. She believed she could. The next contraction came like a massive wave, and she pushed with renewed determination, a primal scream echoing through the room. The head is crowning, Dr. Emily announced, her voice suddenly animated. Sarah, I see your baby. Black hair, lots of hair. One more big push on the next contraction, and he's born. Sarah barely had time to process before the final contraction hit. She pushed with every fiber of her being, feeling an impossible pressure, and then, suddenly, relief. The baby's cry filled the room, sharp, indignant, absolutely beautiful. It's a boy, Dr. Emily announced, lifting the baby so Sarah could see for a brief second before quickly handing him to the waiting neonatology team with a heated incubator. Congratulations, Mom! Sarah tried to sit up, desperate to see her son, but she was too exhausted. David, noticing, went to the medical team. Can I? He asked hesitantly. Just a minute, the neonatologist said, working quickly to clear the baby's airways and check his vital signs. He's breathing on his own. That's excellent. Good heart rate. Weight. He placed the baby on the scale. 4 pounds and 10 ounces. For 34 weeks, that's great. David looked at the tiny crying being, so minuscule and perfect, and felt something break and rebuild simultaneously inside his chest. The baby really did have a lot of black hair, swollen eyes still closed, fists clenched as he protested, against the harshness of being pulled from his warm, safe place. He's perfect, David said, his voice hoarse. He is, the neonatologist agreed, but we need to take him to the neonatal intensive care unit now. The mother can see him as soon as he's stable. David returned to Sarah's side, who was being sutured by Dr. Emily. He took her hand again. He's beautiful, Sarah. Perfect. 4 pounds and 10 ounces, black hair just like yours, and lungs that work perfectly judging by the scream he let out. Sarah smiled through her tears. I wanted to hold him. You will, David promised, as soon as you can. The neonatology team began to leave with the incubator. Sarah turned her head, trying to catch one more glimpse. Wait, she called, her voice weak. How How am I going to name him? The nurse paused for a moment. You haven't chosen a name yet? Sarah shook her head. She had avoided thinking about names, as if naming him before he was born could somehow jinx it, could make it too real, and therefore easier to lose. She looked at David, and for some reason asked, Do you have any suggestions? David blinked, surprised. Me, Sarah, it's not up to me. Please, she interrupted. You've been here. You've been so important in getting us here. What name do you think suits him? David looked at the incubator where the baby was still crying, then back at Sarah. He thought for a moment and then said, Gabriel, it means strong man of God or messenger of God. He hesitated. My mom wanted to name me that, but my dad vetoed it. He said it was too weak of a name. Sarah smiled, tears in her eyes. Gabriel Johnson, perfect. The nurse noted it in the chart and left with the baby. The sound of the cries faded as they moved down the hallway until it completely disappeared, leaving Sarah with a feeling of emptiness in her chest where there had once been fullness. He will come back. You're going to be just fine, Dr. Emily said, finishing the stitches. You did an amazing job, Sarah. You should be proud. But Sarah didn't feel proud. She felt exhausted, scared, and terribly alone, even with David by her side. What if something goes wrong? She whispered. What if he isn't strong enough? He is, David said, with that unwavering certainty that seemed to be his trademark. He's your son. Of course he's strong enough. 2 hours later, Sarah was taken to a private room on the maternity floor. It was a spacious room with an adjustable bed, a sofa bed for a companion, a wall-mounted TV, and a large window showing the New York City skyline illuminated by night. David had briefly stepped out to move the car and make some calls, but he returned quickly, carrying a bag from a deli. The nurse said, You're probably starving, he said, placing the bag on the side table. I brought a sandwich, juice, and fruit, whatever you want. Sarah realized she was indeed starving. She hadn't eaten since the interrupted breakfast. She took the sandwich and ate mechanically, not really savoring it, just filling the void. The neonatal team said you can visit him as soon as you feel able to walk, David informed her, sitting on the sofa. He had taken off the surgical gown, but still wore the wrinkled dress shirt from earlier. The blazer was tossed over the back of the sofa, the tie somewhere he didn't care about anymore. There's no set visiting hours for mothers. You can go whenever you want, stay as long as you want. And you? Sarah asked. What about you? Can you visit him too, or is it just family? David was quiet for a moment. I'm not family, Sarah. Only you can. But you were there when he was born. She searched for the right words. You're important to him, to us. Sarah, David started, then stopped, running his hands over his face. I don't want to overstep. You've been very generous in including me in all of this, but at the end of the day, Gabriel is your son, not mine. I know that, Sarah said softly, but he wouldn't have made it here without you, without everything you did. So if I want you to be a part of his life, at least while we're living in your house, don't you think you should respect my choice? David looked at her, something intense and undefined passing over his face. Are you sure? Absolutely. He nodded slowly. Then yes, I would love to get to know him better, to visit him. Sarah finished eating and a nurse entered to check her. Vital signs. Everything was normal. The recovery from a normal delivery was relatively quick, the nurse explained, but Sarah should avoid intense physical exertion for the next few weeks. You lost a bit of blood, so you might feel dizzy or weak. Take it easy, she instructed, and if you want to see your baby, we can arrange a wheelchair. I want to, Sarah said immediately. I want to see him now. David helped her out of bed, steadying her by the arm when she wobbled a bit. She sat in the wheelchair and David pushed her through the hospital corridors until they reached the neonatal intensive care unit. The entrance had a strict protocol. They had to wash their hands thoroughly, wear gowns and masks, and remove any jewelry. Then they were guided inside by a kind nurse named Emily. The neonatal intensive care unit was a large space divided into several sections with illuminated incubators. There were at least 20 babies there, all tiny, all connected to wires, tubes, and machines. The ambient sound was a symphony of beeps, ventilators, and occasionally faint cries. "Gabriel is here," Emily said, leading them to an incubator in the corner. "He's doing very well, considering. He didn't need mechanical ventilation, just a bit of supplemental oxygen. He's being fed through a tube at the moment, but if all goes well, we can try breastfeeding in a few days." Sarah looked inside the incubator and felt her heart break and rebuild simultaneously. Gabriel was lying on his stomach, wearing only a tiny diaper and a blue cap. He was so small that he looked like a doll, not a real person. His chest rose and fell quickly, his eyes still closed, his little hands open beside his head. There was a clip on his foot, monitoring his oxygen saturation, electrodes on his tiny chest, monitoring his heart, and a thin tube entering his nose. "Can I touch him?" Sarah asked, her voice breaking. "Yes, you can," Emily said, opening the side doors of the incubator. "Just touch gently. Premature babies are very sensitive to stimuli." Sarah extended her hand with trembling fingers and gently touched Gabriel's little chest. His skin was incredibly soft and warm. Under her palm, she felt his heart beating rapidly. "Hi, my love," she whispered, tears falling freely now. "Hi, Gabriel. Mommy is here. You're doing so well, my warrior, so well." Gabriel stirred slightly under her touch, his tiny mouth opening in a minuscule yawn. David was beside her, looking at the baby with an expression she had never seen on him before. Pure admiration, mixed with something that looked a lot like love. "He has your eyes," David said softly, "the shape of them. And so much hair." Sarah laughed through her tears. "Just like me when I was born," my mum always said. They stayed there for an hour, just watching Gabriel sleep, gently touching him through the doors, whispering words of encouragement. Emily came and went, checking monitors, adjusting settings, explaining each alarm that occasionally sounded. "You can come visit whenever you want," she said. "No visiting hours for parents. It's important for him to hear your voices, feel your touches. It helps with his development." When they finally returned to the room, Sarah was exhausted, but also strangely at peace. Seeing Gabriel, watching him breathe on his own, fighting to live, had given her renewed strength. "You should rest," David said as she lay down on the bed. "It's been quite a day." "You too," she replied. Sarah pointed. She looked at the sofa bed. "Are you going to sleep here?" David hesitated. "Do you want me to stay?" "I do," she admitted. "I know it's asking a lot, but I don't want to be alone tonight. Not after everything." "Then I'll stay," he said simply, as if there were no discussion. He turned off the main light, leaving only the dim lamp on, and lay down on the sofa bed, fully dressed. Sarah rolled onto her side, looking at him through the dim light. "David?" "Yes?" "Thank you. For everything, for being there, for holding my hand, for being you." There was a long silence. Then he replied, his voice hoarse with restrained emotion. "There's no place in the world I'd rather be. Remember that." Sarah closed her eyes, those words wrapping around her like a warm blanket. And for the first time in months, maybe years, she felt completely safe. Not because she was in an expensive hospital or because she had a roof over her head or food on the table, but because David Anderson, a man who had sworn never to let anyone in again, had chosen to let her in, and somehow in the process, she had let him in too. The next morning, Sarah woke up to a nurse entering to check her blood pressure and temperature. Everything was fine. David had already woken up and left, leaving a note on the nightstand. "I went home to shower and get clean clothes. I'll be back soon with decent breakfast. Text me if you need anything. D." Sarah smiled as she read it, carefully folding the note and putting it in her bag. It was silly, perhaps, but she wanted to keep it. The morning passed in a routine of medical checks and visits to the neonatal intensive care unit. Gabriel was stable, Nurse Emily reported cheerfully. He had gained a few grams overnight, a good sign. David returned around 10, bringing fresh croissants, fruit, Greek yogurt, and specialty coffee from one of his restaurants. "Dr. Emily said you'll be discharged tomorrow," he said, as he set up breakfast on the table. "Gabriel will still be here for a few weeks, but you can come visit him whenever you want." "I'll come every day," Sarah said determinedly. "All day if they let me." "They do. It's encouraged, actually. Contact with the mother helps in his recovery." Sarah picked up a croissant, but suddenly her expression turned worried. "What's wrong?" David asked, noticing immediately. "I was thinking about our agreement. You said it would end 2 months after the baby was born, when I was recovered. But Gabriel won't even be home 2 months later. He'll still be here. And she swallowed hard. "I won't have anywhere to go, not immediately." David sat on the edge of the bed, his face serious. "Sarah, look at me." She obeyed, meeting those dark eyes. "Do you really think I'm going to put you out on the street while your son is in the neonatal intensive care unit? What kind of monster do you think I am?" "No, I don't think you're a monster. The agreement changed the moment Gabriel was born prematurely," David interrupted firmly. "You stay in the house for as long as you need, until Gabriel is discharged, until you feel ready to go. No pressure, no deadlines. Understood? But the money, the health insurance, all of that." "Sarah," he took her hand. "Please, stop worrying about money. I have more money than I can spend in 10 lifetimes. What I don't have is—" He paused, seeming to search for the right words. "What I don't have is someone who truly cares. Someone who makes me want to go home at the end of the day. Someone who turned that cold house into something that feels like a home." Sarah's heart raced. "David, what are you saying?" He released her hand, standing up and walking to the window, hands in his pockets. "I'm saying that things have changed, for me at least. And I know it's not fair to say this now, with you just having had a baby in such a vulnerable moment, but I've never been good at hiding what I feel once I finally admit to myself that I'm feeling it." "And what are you feeling?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. David turned to face her, and there was something so intense in his eyes that she held her breath. "That I've fallen in love with you, completely, irrevocably, in a way that I swore I would never let happen again, after Julia." He ran a hand through his hair, a rare display of nervousness. "And I know this complicates everything. I know you might feel pressured because of our situation, because of everything I've done for you. That's why I'm not asking for anything. I'm not expecting you to feel the same. I just needed you to know the truth." Sarah was silent for a long moment, processing. Her heart was beating so fast that she was sure he could hear it. Part of her wanted to scream yes, that she had also fallen in love, that she thought of him constantly, that his presence was the highlight of her days. But another part, the part that still carried scars from Mark, that still feared confusing gratitude with love, that feared ruining the good thing they had by wanting more. That part made her hesitate. She started, then stopped. "David, I don't know what to say. This is all so new, so scary. I just got out of a terrible relationship 6 months ago. I just had a baby. I can barely process my own life, let alone add such intense feelings for someone else." He nodded, disappointment evident but contained. "I understand, and as I said, I'm not asking for anything. Just think about it." Calmly, no pressure, he headed for the door. "I'll give you... It's been a while. Anything you need, just call me." "David, wait," Sarah called out. He stopped, his hand on the doorknob. "I didn't say I don't feel anything. I just said I need time to process, to be sure of what I'm feeling. Is that enough for now?" He turned around, and a small smile touched his lips. "It's more than enough." And with that he left, leaving Sarah alone with her turbulent thoughts and a heart that insisted on racing whenever she thought of him. Down in the neonatal intensive care unit, Gabriel slept soundly in his incubator, oblivious to the drama unfolding upstairs, his tiny chest rising and falling in a steady, strong rhythm. Fighting, surviving, just like his mother taught him. The following weeks established a routine that was both comforting and laden with unresolved tension. Sarah was discharged from the hospital 2 days after giving birth, but she returned religiously every day to spend hours by Gabriel's incubator. David drove her every morning and picked her up every night, never complaining about the odd hours or the heavy traffic of New York City. Gabriel was making progress, slowly, but he was progressing. On the 10th day of life, he weighed 4 pounds and 10 ounces, a significant gain that made the medical team celebrate. The tubes began to be gradually removed. First the supplemental oxygen, then the more invasive monitors. On the 15th day, Sarah was given permission to try breastfeeding him for the first time. It was a warm September afternoon when Emily called her with an excited smile. "He's feeding well from the tube and showing signs of a strong suck. I think he's ready to try the breast." Sarah felt a mix of excitement and terror. What if she couldn't? What if Gabriel rejected her? She had read so many articles about the challenges of breastfeeding premature babies. "Breathe, dear," Emily said gently, noticing her anxiety. "No one expects perfection the first time. It's a learning experience for both of you." They settled into a comfortable chair in the breastfeeding room, a private space with soft lighting and relaxing ambient music. Emily carefully took Gabriel out of the incubator, wrapped him in a blanket, and placed him in Sarah's arms. It was the first time she held him without the barriers of the incubator. He was so light, so fragile, yet at the same time so perfectly formed. His eyes, which had opened for the first time 3 days ago, were a deep grey that Dr. Emily said would eventually settle into brown or blue. His black hair was even more abundant now that they had bathed him, forming soft waves on his tiny head. "Hi, my love," Sarah whispered, tears already in her eyes. "Mommy is here. Shall we try something new today?" Emily helped her position Gabriel correctly, explaining about the latch, the angle the patients needed. Gabriel moved his little head, instinctively searching, his mouth making movements that Emily called fishy yawns. And then, like a small miracle, he latched on. The sensation was strange, not painful as she had been warned it could be at first, but a firm pressure and a rhythmic pull. Gabriel nursed for almost 10 minutes before falling asleep, exhausted from the effort. "Perfect," Emily celebrated softly. "For a first time, that was exceptional. He has a very good suck." Sarah looked at her son sleeping in her arms, content and peaceful, and felt a wave of love so intense it almost hurt physically. All the doubts, all the fears, all the uncertainties about being a mother, everything dissolved in that moment. She would do anything, absolutely anything, to protect that tiny being. "Can I take a picture?" she asked Emily, "to show to David?" She still avoided defining him. He wasn't just Gabriel's father, but he wasn't merely her employer either. What he was exactly, she was still figuring out. Emily took several beautiful photos of Sarah holding Gabriel, of his sleeping little face, of his tiny hands curled around her finger. Sarah chose the best one and sent it to David with the message, "First feeding was a success. He's perfect." The response came almost instantly. "I always knew he would be. You two are champions. I'll pick you up at 7 as always." "Yes, thank you. No need to thank me. See you soon." Sarah put her phone away and asked Emily to put Gabriel back in the incubator. It was time for him to rest, and she needed a break too. She went to the hospital's solarium, an open space on the top floor where visitors could breathe fresh air, and sat on a bench, looking out at the enormous city stretching in all directions. New York City in the late afternoon was a spectacle of contrasts. Gleaming skyscrapers next to old buildings, green spaces squeezed between concrete, the chaotic traffic forming rivers of red and white lights on the avenues. "Sarah?" She turned and saw a woman approaching. It took a second to recognize her, Lisa, David's administrative manager, who had shown the house on the first day. "Lisa, hi," Sarah said, surprised. "What are you doing here?" "Visiting my mother. She had knee surgery last week." Lisa sat down on the bench next to her, her posture always impeccable, even in casual clothes. "And you? Oh, right. Your baby is still in the neonatal intensive care unit, isn't he? How is he doing?" "Well, progressing every day." Sarah hesitated, then asked, "Did you know about Gabriel?" "David told me, yes. He asked me to prepare some things at the house for when you both come back. Crib, changing table, baby clothes. I hope you don't mind the intrusion." "No, of course not. That was very kind." Lisa fell silent for a moment, her eyes studying Sarah in a way that made her uncomfortable. "Can I be frank with you?" Lisa finally asked. "Sure. When David told me about you that first night, that he had found a woman, pregnant woman ordering food and decided to take it home, I thought he had lost his mind." Lisa let out a short, humorless laugh. "I called him the next day, tried to convince him that it was dangerous, that you could be anyone, that he was taking unnecessary risks." Sarah felt her stomach tighten but said nothing. "He told me I was being prejudiced, and that the decision had already been made," Lisa continued. "I was worried. David is like a brother to me. We've worked together for 15 years, since he took over the business after his father's death. I saw him go through hell with Julia. I saw him build walls so high that no one could reach him. So when you showed up, I was afraid you would hurt him in some way." "I would never do that," Sarah said firmly. "Never." "I know that now," Lisa said, turning to look at her directly, "because I see how he has changed. In the last few months, David has changed in ways I didn't think were possible. He smiles more. He leaves the office at decent hours. He talks about going home as if it's something he really wants, not just an obligation. And today, when he called me to tell me about Gabriel breastfeeding for the first time, there was so much pride in his voice." Lisa shook her head. "Sarah, that man is completely in love with you and your son." Sarah felt her cheeks flush. Did he say something to you?" "He didn't need to. I know David well enough to read what he doesn't say," Lisa sighed. "And that's why I'm telling you this. Please be careful with him. I'm not saying you should reciprocate his feelings if you don't feel the same. That would be unfair to both of you. But be honest. Be clear about what you want. David has already been shattered once by someone he completely trusted. I don't know if he would survive a second time." The weight of those words settled on Sarah's shoulders like a heavy cloak. "I never wanted to hurt him," she said softly. "But I also don't know what I'm feeling yet. Everything is so confusing, so complicated. I just came out of an abusive relationship. I just had a baby. My whole life is upside down. How can I be sure that what I feel for David is real love and not just gratitude, or dependency, or I don't know what?" Lisa nodded, her expression softening. Those are valid questions, and you deserve time to answer them. Just don't take too long, because life has a cruel habit of making decisions for us when we hesitate. With that, Lisa stood up briefly, placed a hand on Sarah's shoulder in a surprisingly maternal gesture, and left, leaving Sarah alone with even more turbulent thoughts. October arrived, bringing those violent rains typical of spring in New York City, storms that came out of nowhere, turning the streets into rivers in minutes and then disappeared, leaving the air clean and the sky blue again. Gabriel was a month old, and finally, the medical team gave the news that Sarah had been waiting for. He would be discharged in a few days. He is over 2.5 kilos, breastfeeding well, maintaining, his temperature on his own, Dr. Emily listed during the evaluation meeting. All indicators are excellent. There is no longer any reason to keep him here. Sarah cried tears of relief. A whole month going back and forth from the hospital, living in a kind of limbo where her son existed but couldn't go home, and now, finally, they would be a real family. You will have to return for weekly checkups in the first month, Dr. Emily continued. Then bi-weekly, then monthly. But it's standard protocol. Gabriel is healthy. David, who had asked to be present at the meeting, squeezed Sarah's hand under the table. She looked at him and saw tears in his eyes, too. In the days leading up to the discharge, Sarah discovered that David had transformed one of the rooms on the first floor into a complete nursery. When she came home from the hospital that night, he took her there almost shyly. "If you don't like it, we can change everything," he said before opening the door. "I know I should have asked, but I wanted to surprise you." He opened the door, and Sarah was left speechless. The nursery was perfect. The walls painted a soft blue with delicate white clouds, a light wood crib in the center with a mobile of stars and moons gently spinning, a comfortable chair for breastfeeding near the window, a spacious changing table equipped with everything she could need, shelves with children's books, stuffed animals, baby clothes organized by size, even a lamp that projected constellations on the ceiling. "David," she whispered, slowly turning to absorb every detail. It's too beautiful." "Lisa helped me," he admitted. "Well, actually, Lisa did almost everything. I just approved the choices and paid, but I wanted Gabriel to have his own room, a place just for him." Sarah turned to face him, and something broke inside her when she saw the vulnerability on his face. This man who owed her nothing, who could have simply fulfilled the original agreement and gone on with his life, had prepared a nursery, not in the basement where she slept, but on the main floor, as if Gabriel were part of the family, as if they were part of the family. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "This means more than you can imagine." "Sarah, I need to tell you something," David said suddenly, the words coming out quickly, as if he were afraid of losing his courage. "I spoke with my lawyers about that agreement we made at the beginning, the temporary contract. I annulled it." "What? Why?" "Because it no longer made sense. Because—" He ran his hand through his hair, that nervous gesture she already recognized. "Because I don't want to. You will leave when the 2 months after birth are over. I don't want you to feel pressured to leave, just because that was the original plan. You and Gabriel, you can stay as long as you want, years if necessary, forever if you want." Sarah's heart raced dangerously. "David, I know it complicates things," he interrupted. "I know it makes everything more confusing. But I can't pretend anymore that this is just a work arrangement. It stopped being that the moment I held your hand in that delivery room. Or maybe before. Maybe since that first night when you were soaked in the rain, but still had enough dignity to offer work in exchange for help." Sarah felt tears beginning to fall. "I'm so scared," she admitted. "Scared of confusing gratitude with love, scared of ruining what we have by wanting more, scared that one day you'll wake up and realize you're stuck with a woman with a baby who isn't yours, a woman who came from nowhere and has nothing to offer." David closed the distance between them in 2 steps, his hands holding her face with a gentleness that contrasted with the intensity in his eyes. "You have nothing to offer. Sarah, you gave me back something I thought I had lost forever, the ability to feel, to trust, to want, to wake up in the morning because there's someone who makes everything worthwhile. You turned an empty house into a home. You remind me every day of what really matters in life." "But Gabriel isn't your son," she whispered. "Not biologically," David agreed. "But I was there when he was born. I held your hand through every second of that labor. I was the first person besides the medical team to see him. I watched him learn to latch, to keep his eyes open, to gain every ounce. And every time I look at him, I feel like a part of my heart is outside my body, vulnerable and precious. Isn't that enough?" Sarah sobbed, his words breaking down the last barriers she had built around her own heart. "I'm in love with you," she finally admitted, her voice cracking. "I was so scared to admit it, but I am. Completely. And it's not gratitude, I'm sure of that now. It's because you're kind even when you don't have to be. It's because you watch YouTube videos about birthing techniques. It's because you cry when you see Gabriel sleeping. It's because you see me, really see me, not as a charity project or an obligation, but as a person worth knowing." David kissed her. It was a desperate kiss, filled with months of pent-up tension, unspoken feelings, silent promises. His hands tangled in her hair, pulling her closer, while her hands clung to his shirt, as if it were the only thing keeping her standing. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless, resting their foreheads against each other. "So, are we going to try this?" David asked, his voice hoarse. "For real?" "Let's," Sarah agreed, "but slowly, carefully, because now it's not just about us two. Gabriel is in the middle of this too." "Slowly," David promised. "But Sarah, I want you to know that I'm all in. You, Gabriel, everything. It's not a test. It's not something I'll walk away from when it gets hard. I'm committed." Sarah nodded, believing him, because his actions over the past months spoke louder than any words could. 3 days later, on a sunny October morning, Gabriel was discharged from the hospital. Sarah dressed him in a light blue onesie, put on the hat she had knitted during the long hours sitting by the incubator, and wrapped him in a soft blanket. David was there, filming everything on his phone with a goofy smile on his face. "First real outfit," he narrated. "First time leaving the hospital, first day at home." Nurse Emily, who had become very close to them during the month, was openly crying. "You're going to do so well," she said, hugging Sarah, "and any doubts, any concerns, don't hesitate to call." The drive home was tense. Sarah was in the back seat next to the infant car seat, checking on Gabriel every 3 seconds to make sure he was still breathing. David drove with exaggerated caution, obeying every signal, every speed limit. When they finally arrived home, David insisted on carrying the infant car seat. He climbed the stairs to the nursery and carefully placed Gabriel in the crib. The baby, blissfully unaware of the adult's anxiety around him, was sleeping soundly, his lips making sucking motions even in his sleep. "He's home," Sarah whispered, leaning against David as they looked at the crib. "Finally home." "You're home," David gently corrected, kissing the top of her head. "Both of you." And for the first time since leaving that small town 6 months ago, Sarah felt like she truly had a home. Not because of the beautiful walls, or the expensive furniture, or the plentiful food, but because there, in that room with a sleeping baby and a man who loved her by her side, she finally belonged somewhere. She was finally safe. The first night with Gabriel at home was both wonderful and terrifying. He woke up 3 times to nurse, and each time Sarah panicked. Was he nursing enough? Was the room at the right temperature? Was he breathing properly? David, who had insisted on sleeping in the next room with the door open, appeared every time he heard movement. "Need help?" he asked, sleepy but concerned. "No, it's fine," she lied, trying to sound more confident than she felt. The third time, at 4 in the morning, David simply walked in and sat down. In the armchair next to her while Gabriel was nursing, he said softly, "You don't have to do this alone, you know. I'm here. Use me." "You already do so much," Sarah protested. "And I want to do more," he insisted. "Sarah, when I said I was all in, I meant it. That includes sleepless nights, dirty diapers, the crying, everything." Sarah looked at him, hair tousled from sleep, eyes red from exhaustion, but still there, still present, and felt her heart expand painfully. "Okay," she agreed. "Together, then." "Together," he confirmed with a smile. And there, at 4 in the morning, with a baby nursing and the city sleeping outside, they began to build something new. Not perfect. It would never be perfect, but real and true. And theirs. November arrived, bringing that humid warmth that precedes the New York summer, when the air becomes heavy, and the afternoons explode into violent storms that refresh everything for a few hours before the cycle starts again. Gabriel was 2 months old now, weighing 9 pounds and 7 ounces, a perfectly healthy baby who had exceeded all the medical team's expectations. Sarah was in the living room, sitting on the plush rug with Gabriel lying on a colorful blanket, doing that exercise the pediatric physical therapist had taught her. She gently moved his little legs, humming a nursery rhyme her mother used to sing to her. "Round and round the garden, let's all go around, let's turn around, round and round we go." Gabriel watched her with those eyes that had settled into a deep brown like hers, his little mouth slightly open in what almost looked like a smile. Dr. Emily said that social smiles began around this age, but Sarah still wasn't sure if it was just a reflex or if he was really responding to her. "What do you think, little one?" she whispered, giving his tummy gentle tickles. "Are you happy? Is Mummy doing a good job?" "Mummy is doing an excellent job," came Raphael's voice from the doorway. Sarah looked up and smiled. He had come home early, something that had been happening more frequently. He was wearing jeans and a light blue dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up, his blazer and tie already discarded somewhere. His hair was slightly messy, as if he had run his hands through it repeatedly throughout the day, a sign of stressful meetings. "Tough day?" she asked. "Annoying investors who think they know more about the culinary world than those of us who actually work in it," he said, taking off his dress shoes and leaving them at the entrance before coming closer. "But it's better now." He sat down on the floor next to her, and Gabriel immediately turned, his little head toward him, his eyes lighting up. In recent days, Sarah had noticed that Gabriel recognized Raphael, his voice, his scent, his presence. The baby visibly perked up when he saw him. "Hey, champ," Raphael said softly, offering his finger for Gabriel to hold. The tiny fingers immediately closed around it with surprising strength. "How was your day? Did you let your mom sleep, or were you the terrible baby I imagine you to be?" Sarah laughed. "He was an angel. He nursed, slept, nursed again, slept again. I'm starting to think they swapped my baby at the hospital. Because this isn't normal." "Enjoy it while it lasts," Raphael advised. "I read in one of those baby books that they go through phases. 1 minute they're angels, the next they're little dictators." "You read baby books?" Sarah asked, trying to suppress a smile. 3, he admitted without the slightest embarrassment, "and I'm halfway through the 4th. I prefer to be prepared." Sarah shook her head. that familiar warmth spreading through her chest. Who would have thought that Raphael Johnson, the feared and respected businessman, would be reading baby-raising books in his spare time? "I was thinking," Raphael said, still playing with Gabriel's fingers. "It's been almost 2 months since you've been home, and you haven't gone out once except for doctor's appointments. You must be going crazy cooped up here." "I'm not crazy," Sarah protested, but it was a lie, and they both knew it. The truth was that she was starting to feel claustrophobic, as if the walls, no matter how beautiful, were closing in around her. "How about we go out tomorrow?" Raphael suggested. "The 3 of us. We can go to Central Park, take a walk, get some ice cream. Dr. Emily said it's okay to take Gabriel. To open spaces now that he's had his first vaccinations." Sarah hesitated. The idea of going out as a family, because that's what they were becoming, right, was both exciting and terrifying. "What if someone recognizes you?" she asked. "What if there are photographers or gossip, or let them recognize me?" Raphael said simply, "Sarah, I'm tired of living my life in fear of what people will think or say. I'm tired of hiding what matters. I want to go out with you and Gabriel. I want the world to know that you both are important to me." "But people will ask questions. They'll want to know who I am, where I came from, if Gabriel is your son." "And we'll answer with the truth," Raphael gently interrupted. "That you are the woman I love. That Gabriel is her son, whom I consider mine too. That we are a family, no matter the DNA." Sarah felt tears welling up. They had been together for just over a month officially, but sometimes it felt like a lifetime, and other times, like now, it felt alarmingly new and fragile. "Okay," she finally agreed. "Let's go to the park tomorrow." The smile that lit up Raphael's face was worth any anxiety she felt. Central Park on a Saturday morning was crowded. Joggers doing their laps, families with children, couples holding hands, vendors offering coconut water and popcorn. Sarah pushed the new stroller, another gift from Raphael, while he walked beside her. Sarah occasionally placed her hand on the lower part of her back in a possessive yet comforting gesture. Gabriel was awake, his little eyes wide open, observing the new world around him. The movement of the stroller and the sounds of nature seemed to fascinate him. "Are you seeing the trees, Gabriel?" Sarah leaned in to talk to him. "And the little birds, can you hear the birds singing?" They walked along the main path, stopping occasionally to rest on benches in the shade. At one point, David stepped away to buy coconut water for them, leaving Sarah alone with Gabriel for a few minutes. "Excuse me," a female voice said. Sarah looked up and saw a woman in her mid-30s smiling, with a professional camera hanging around her neck. "Sorry to bother you, but aren't you with David Anderson, the restaurant entrepreneur?" Sarah's stomach tightened. "Yes, I am." "Are you two together? Like dating?" the woman asked, subtly raising her camera. "Look, I'd rather not," Sarah began. "Sarah," David reappeared, positioning himself between her and the woman with the camera, not aggressively, but definitely protectively. "Is there a problem?" "David Anderson!" the woman exclaimed excitedly. "I'm Jessica Brown from the NY Gourmet blog. Can I ask you a few quick questions? Our readers would love to know more about your personal life. I saw you with a lady and a baby. Is he your son?" Sarah saw David take a deep breath, that professional entrepreneur mask slipping into place for a second. But then, surprisingly, he relaxed and smiled, a genuine smile. "Gabriel is Sarah's son," he said calmly. "But yes, we are a family. And before you ask, no, I won't be sharing intimate details about our private life, but I can confirm that we are together and very happy." Jessica was already frantically taking notes. "And how long have you been together? How did you meet?" "We met a few months ago," David said vaguely. "And about how, that's a private story of ours. Now, if you'll excuse us, we'd like to enjoy our family outing." He took Sarah's hand. And they walked away, leaving the blogger behind. Sarah was trembling slightly. "This will be all over the blogs by tomorrow," she said, her voice tight. "Probably," David agreed calmly. And then, David, people are going to start investigating. They'll find out about me, about Gabriel, about Sarah. "Stop," he said, halting and turning to face her. "Listen, I have excellent lawyers. If anyone tries to expose information that puts you or Gabriel in danger, we will handle it. But we can't live our lives in constant fear of exposure. It's not healthy. It's not fair to any of us." He was right, and she knew it. But years of living with Mark, always walking on eggshells, always afraid of doing something wrong, had left deep scars. I don't want my baggage to ruin your reputation," she admitted softly. "Sarah, look at me." He waited until she raised her eyes. "You are not baggage, never were, and my reputation. Who cares? If people have a problem with me being with an amazing woman and helping raise a wonderful baby, that's their problem, not ours." Sarah wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe it could be that simple. They continued their walk, but the magic had been slightly broken. Sarah became hyper-vigilant, looking for cameras, watching to see if anyone was following them. It was only when they returned home, Gabriel soundly asleep in the stroller after so much stimulation, that she managed to relax. David was right about one thing. The next day, there were 3 articles on different blogs about David Anderson seen with new girlfriend and baby in Central Park. The photos were discreet, taken from a distance, but clearly showed the 3 of them together. The comments were mixed. Some congratulating, others speculating about who Sarah was, and others criticizing David for hiding a family when he had always been so private about his personal life. "Don't read the comments," David advised when he caught her on her phone for the 5th time that morning. "Never ever read the comments. It's the first rule of having any kind of public exposure. But what if someone finds out about Mark? What if he sees these photos and—" "Sarah," David held her face between his hands. "Mark is 400 miles away. He is under investigation for assault, and if he tries anything, my lawyers will destroy him legally. You are safe. Gabriel is safe, I promise." She wanted to believe, but a part of her, that part that still carried fear in her bones, whispered that safety was an illusion, that at any moment everything could come crashing down. The bombshell dropped on a Monday afternoon, 2 weeks after their park outing. Sarah was bathing Gabriel. He now loved the water, happily splashing in the little tub, when the intercom buzzed insistently. She wrapped the baby in a towel, checked the video from the intercom, and froze. It was a woman she didn't know, but there was something familiar about her, something that triggered instant alarms in Sarah's mind. "Hello?" she answered cautiously. "Sarah Johnson." The woman's voice was cold, calculating. "My name is Jessica Brown. I'm an investigative reporter. I would like to speak with you about Mark Thompson. I believe you know him, don't you?" Sarah's world tilted. Mark. They had found the connection to Mark. I have nothing to say," Sarah managed to respond, her voice trembling. "I have information suggesting that you fled from a small town 7 months ago, pregnant, after filing a police report against Mr. Thompson for domestic violence. I also have information that he searched for you for months. And now you are living with David Anderson, one of the wealthiest entrepreneurs in New York City. This is a good story, Sarah. A story that people deserve to hear. Get out of here, Sarah said, her voice gaining strength even amidst the panic. Leave, or I'll call the building security. I'm leaving, Jessica said calmly. But the article is going to come out anyway. With or without your statement, I just thought I'd give you the chance to tell your side. The connection was cut off. Sarah stood still, holding Gabriel against her chest, the baby starting to fuss because he was wet and cold. With trembling hands, she finished drying and dressing Gabriel, placed him in the crib with some toys, and called David. He answered on the first ring. "Sarah, is everything—" "A reporter was here," she interrupted, the words spilling out quickly, stumbling over each other. "She knows about Mark. She knows I ran away. She knows everything. And she's going to publish an article." Silence on the other end. Then, "I'm coming home. Now. Don't open the door for anyone. Don't talk to anyone. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Those were the longest 20 minutes of Sarah's life. She paced back and forth in the living room, checking on Gabriel every 3 seconds, jumping at every sound. When she finally heard David's car in the garage, she almost collapsed with relief. He burst in like a hurricane, went straight to her, and pulled her into a tight embrace. "Breathe," he instructed. "Tell me everything, word for word." Sarah recounted the conversation, watching David's face grow increasingly serious, his jaw tightening with contained anger. "Jessica Brown," he spat the name. "I know her, or rather, I know her reputation. She's known for sensationalist articles, for twisting facts to create dramatic narratives." He grabbed his phone. "I'm calling my lawyers. We'll try to get a restraining order to stop the publication." "But she said she's going to publish anyway," Sarah said, desperation tinging her voice. "David, what if Mark shows up? What if he finds out where I am? What if he comes after Gabriel?" "That's not going to happen," David said with ironclad conviction. "I won't allow it." But even as he dialed the lawyer's number, Sarah saw the worry in his eyes, because they both knew there were things beyond David Anderson's control. The attorney managing David's personal affairs, the same one Sarah had been briefly introduced to months ago, arrived in less than an hour. Laura Smith was an impressive woman in her 40s, with short black hair cut in a sleek bob, wearing a black suit that screamed power and competence. "First, we need to know exactly what she has," Laura said, setting up her laptop on the dining table. "David, do you know anyone at the publication where she works?" "I know the editor-in-chief," David said. "He owes me some favors." "Great! Call him, find out what we can do." As David made calls, Laura talked to Sarah, asking detailed questions about Mark, about the relationship, about the police report, about everything. "Sarah, you did everything right," Laura said after hearing the whole story. "You documented the assaults, filed a report, got out of the situation. There's nothing here that paints you as the villain. If the article tries to portray you negatively, we'll have grounds for a defamation lawsuit. But it's not about painting me as the villain," Sarah said, her voice trembling. "It's about exposing where I am. It's about giving Mark a map to find me." "Then we'll work on that," Laura said firmly. "I'll contact the authorities in that small town, check the status of the investigation against Mark. If he has restraining orders or is under active investigation, we can use that to strengthen a protection request for you. I'll also look into the possibility of a preventive restraining order if he tries to make contact." David returned, his face grim. "I managed to delay the publication for 48 hours. The editor owes favors and agreed to give me time to prepare an official response. But Sarah—" He knelt in front of her, taking her hands. He said, "The story will come out eventually. We can control how, but we can't stop it completely." Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the world she had so carefully built begin to crumble. "So what do we do?" she asked. "We control the narrative," Laura replied. "Instead of letting this reporter tell the story her way, we tell it first, your way. David, do you know any trustworthy journalists? Someone who would do a serious, respectful piece focused on the issue of domestic violence instead of sensationalism?" "I do," David said slowly, processing. "Carla Johnson from The Times. She did a series on domestic violence last year that won awards. She's serious, ethical." "Perfect," Laura said. Let's offer her an exclusive interview. Sarah tells her story, her version with dignity. We focus on survival, on the courage to start over. We transform you from a victim into a survivor. And in the process, we send a clear message to Mark that you're no longer alone and unprotected. I don't know if I can do this, Sarah admitted, exposing everything for the whole world to see. You don't have to expose everything, Laura clarified. You control what you share. But Sarah, think of it this way. Women in situations similar to yours will read your story. They will see that it's possible to leave, to start over, to find happiness. You can turn this into something positive. Sarah looked at David, seeking guidance. He squeezed her hands. I'm with you, no matter what you decide, he said. If you want to do the interview, I'll be by your side. If you don't want to, we'll find another way. It's your choice. It was her choice, not Mark's, who had always made all the decisions for her, not the gossiping reporters, hers. Okay, she finally said, her voice now stronger. Let's do the interview, but on my terms, with my rules. Laura smiled, a smile of approval and respect. Then let's start working. The interview was scheduled for 2 days later, at her own home. Carla Johnson arrived promptly at 2 in the afternoon, a middle-aged woman with short grey hair, kind eyes, and a small recorder that she placed on the coffee table only after asking for explicit permission. Sarah, Carla began, her voice gentle. Before we start, I want you to know that you control this conversation. If there's anything you don't want to answer, just say so. If you want to pause, we can pause. This is your story, okay? Sarah nodded, grateful for the kindness. David was sitting next to her on the sofa, holding her hand, a silent but solid presence of support. The conversation began gently. Carla asked about her childhood, about losing her parents young, about how she met Mark. Sarah answered calmly, keeping the factual details but without dramatization. When did you realize the relationship was abusive? Carla asked. Sarah thought carefully before responding. It was gradual. At first, he was attentive, protective. But that protection turned into control. He decided what I wore, who I talked to, where I could go. When I questioned him, he said it was because he loved me, because he cared. I believed that for a long time. And the physical violence? When did it start? 6 months after we started dating. A shove during an argument. He cried afterward, apologized, promised it would never happen again. But it did. And it got worse. Sarah took a deep breath. When I found out I was pregnant and he demanded that I have an abortion, when he assaulted me for refusing, that's when I knew I had to leave or I wouldn't survive. Did you have somewhere to go? Family? Friends? He had isolated me from everyone. My sister tried to intervene a few times, but I always defended him, said everything was fine. Eventually, she gave up trying. Sarah felt the tears welling up. So when I decided to run away, I was completely alone. I took a bus to New York City because it was far, enough and big enough to hide. And that's when you met David? Sarah looked at the man beside her, who had become so essential to her existence. Yes, I was literally begging for scraps of food at the door of his restaurant. I was pregnant, desperate, with nowhere to go. And he... She smiled through her tears. He offered me dignity when I thought I deserved none. He gave me a job, not charity. He gave me a chance to rebuild my life. David, Carla turned to him. Why did you help Sarah? David was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. Because I saw my mother in her situation. My mother was also a victim of domestic violence, and no one helped her when she needed it. She died without ever escaping that situation. When I saw Sarah, I saw a chance to do what no one did for my mother. And now you are a couple. Gabriel is not your biological son, but you are raising him as if he were. Is that correct? Gabriel is my son in every way that matters, David said with absolute conviction. I was there when he was born. I held Sarah's hand during every second of that labor. I wake up in the middle of the night when he cries. I change diapers, give baths, sing terrible lullabies. Biology does not define fatherhood. Love does. Carla had tears in her eyes, but maintained her professionalism. Sarah, do you have a message for other women in similar situations? For those reading this who see themselves in your story? Sarah looked directly at the recorder, imagining the women who might hear this. Women trapped, women scared, women who thought there was no way out. You deserve more, she said, her voice firm. Now, you deserve to be loved without being hurt. You deserve to make your own decisions. You deserve to live without fear. And I know it seems impossible to leave. I know how scary it is. But I promise, there is life on the other side. There is joy, there is peace, there is real love. You just need to take the first step. And if you have no one, seek help. Support centers, police, NGOs. There are people who care, even if it seems like no one does. And for Mark? Carla asked. If he's listening to this, what do you want to say? Sarah didn't hesitate. It's over, completely. I'm no longer afraid of him. I'm protected, safe, and surrounded by people who won't let him hurt me again. And more importantly, Gabriel will never, ever know the man who wished he didn't exist. The interview continued for another hour, but those were the central moments. Carla did her job brilliantly. She extracted the story but kept Sarah's dignity intact. When she finally left, promising to send the article for approval before publishing, Sarah collapsed on the sofa, exhausted. You were amazing, David said, pulling her into his arms. So strong, so articulate. I'm so proud of you. I trembled the whole time, Sarah admitted, and yet you did it. That's what defines courage. Not the absence of fear, but acting despite it. The article came out in the Sunday edition of The Times, taking up a full page in the lifestyle section. The photo was beautiful, Sarah holding Gabriel, genuinely smiling, with David by her side, a protective hand on her back. They looked like what they were, a family. The headline was perfect. From violence to rebuilding. The courageous story of Sarah Johnson. The piece was everything Laura had promised, respectful, focused on survival rather than sensationalism, giving voice to Sarah's journey without exploiting her. The response was overwhelming. Messages began pouring in, hundreds of them, women sharing their own stories, thanking Sarah for having the courage to speak, saying her story inspired them to seek help. But there was also the message Sarah feared. It came via email from an anonymous account 3 days after publication. Do you think you can expose me publicly and not face consequences? Do you think you can become a heroine after destroying me? You don't know who you're messing with, Sarah. I will find you, and when I do, you will regret every word of that article. It was Mark. It had to be. Sarah showed the email to David and Laura immediately. The lawyer sprang into action, documenting everything, filing a formal request. Marina had a protective order in place, alerting the police. He's incriminating himself, Fernanda said. Written threats are concrete evidence. This will be used against him. But legal knowledge did not erase the fear that had settled back into Marina's chest. David hired private security for the house, discreet but present. Cameras were installed all around the perimeter. A panic button was placed in every main room. He won't get close to you, David promised for the 100th time. I promise, Marina. And Marina wanted to believe. But she knew Mark. She knew his obsession, his wounded pride, his capacity for violence. The storm was coming. She could feel it in her bones. The only question was, when would it hit? December arrived. bringing that suffocating heat of New York City summer when air conditioning became an essential luxury rather than just a comfort. The city was preparing for the holiday season. Decorative lights began to appear on the trees along the avenues. Shopping centers set up gigantic Christmas trees, and Fifth Avenue transformed into a spectacle of colors at night. Marina was in the kitchen preparing lunch, while Gabriel slept in his stroller beside her. She'd gotten used to keeping him close, ever since Mark's threatening email 2 weeks ago. Even inside the house, with all the security that David had installed, she couldn't fully relax. The phone rang. It was Carla, her sister. Marina had finally called her after. The article was published, knowing that Carla would see the story anyway. The initial conversation was difficult, Carla crying with relief to know she was alive, furious that Marina hadn't trusted her, grateful to David for keeping her safe. "Marina, hi." Carla's voice sounded strange, tense. "Carla, did something happen?" "He was here. Mark. He came to my house last night." Marina's world stopped. The phone almost slipped from her hand. What did he want?" "Information about you. Where you are, how he can find you. I obviously didn't say anything. I threatened to call the police, and he left." "But Marina..." Carla took a deep breath. "He wasn't well. He seemed obsessed, talking about how you betrayed him, that you publicly exposed him, that baby was his by right. I was scared, so scared that I called the police after he left. They filed a report." "Oh my God," Marina whispered, sitting heavily in the chair. "Carla, I'm so sorry. I never wanted to put you in danger." "It's not your fault. It never was," Carla said firmly. "But you need to be careful, Marina. He is actively looking for you, and he seemed determined, almost irrational." After they hung up, Marina sat in the kitchen for long minutes, trembling. Gabriel woke up and started to fuss, needing to be changed and fed, and she went into autopilot, her brain still processing the information. Mark was actively hunting her. He wasn't just making empty threats online, he was really searching. When David got home at 6 in the evening, she told him everything. She saw his jaw tighten, his eyes darken with contained rage. "He went to your sister's house?" David asked, his voice dangerously low. "Did he threaten her?" "He didn't threaten her directly, but Carla was scared enough to call the police." David immediately picked up the phone, calling Fernanda. The lawyer arrived in 40 minutes, and they spent the entire night devising additional security strategies. "We need to consider that he knows you are in New York City and probably knows you are with David," Fernanda said. "The article didn't mention the specific address, but someone determined could find out. David, your addresses are relatively public due to your businesses." "So, what are you suggesting?" David asked. "That you consider leaving the city for a while, a few months perhaps, until the situation calms down, until the police do their job." "Run away?" Marina said, something rebelling inside her. "Again? I ran away once. I spent months living in fear, hiding. Now I have a home, a family. I don't want to run away again." "Marina, I understand your point," Fernanda said gently. "But sometimes the smartest strategy is to retreat temporarily. This isn't weakness, it's protection, especially for Gabriel." The mention of her son made Marina hesitate. She looked at the sleeping baby in the stroller, so innocent, so unaware of the danger surrounding them. "I have a beach house in the Hamptons," David said thoughtfully. "It's secluded, has 24-hour private security, and is registered under one of my companies. Not so easy to trace back to me personally. We could spend the holidays there, Christmas, New Year's, until things calm down." "And your restaurants, your work?" Marina questioned. "I have excellent managers at all the restaurants. I can work remotely for the important things and trust the team for the rest." He took her hand. "Marina, my businesses are important, but you are more important. You and Gabriel are my priority." Marina wanted to argue, wanted, To say that they couldn't let David's life be dictated by fear, but exhaustion and terror overcame her. "Okay," she finally agreed. "Let's go to the Hamptons." They left New York City 3 days later, in the dead of night. David drove his private SUV, not the usual car with a driver, to avoid obvious traces. Marina sat in the back seat with Gabriel, who was sleeping peacefully in his car seat, oblivious to the drama. The trip to the Hamptons took about 4.5 hours. They stopped once at a remote gas station to refuel and change Gabriel's diaper, always vigilant, always checking if anyone was following them. David's beach house was in a secluded area, accessible only by a private road. It was a stunning property, modern, all glass and light wood, with a direct view of the ocean. It had 4 suites, an infinity pool that seemed to merge with the ocean, and perfectly maintained tropical gardens. "This is amazing," Marina said as they got out of the car. The air, the salty sea air filled her lungs, and for the first time in weeks she felt something resembling peace. "I rarely come here," David admitted, grabbing the bags from the trunk. "Maybe twice a year. It's too far from New York City for weekend getaways, and I never take long enough vacations to make it worthwhile. But I've always liked it here. It's peaceful." They quickly settled in. Sarah chose the master suite, which had a private balcony overlooking the ocean and a huge closet for herself and Gabriel. David took the adjacent suite, connected by an internal door that they left slightly ajar. "In case you need anything during the night," he explained, and Sarah silently thanked him for the consideration. The first days in the Hamptons were strangely idyllic. They established a simple routine, waking up with the sun rising over the ocean, breakfast on the balcony while Gabriel played on the rug with his toys, walks on the private beach when the sun was weaker, and swimming in the pool in the afternoon. David worked a few hours a day from the office set up in the house, doing video conferences and responding to urgent emails, but much less than he used to work in New York City. Sarah caught him several times, just staring at the sea, lost in thought, a rare expression of peace on his normally tense face. "You should come here more often," she commented one afternoon while they were on the balcony watching Gabriel have his first encounter with the beach sand. The baby was fascinated by the texture, grabbing handfuls and letting it slip through his fingers. "I should," David agreed, "but alone it wouldn't be the same. It always seemed a waste to be in such a beautiful place without anyone to share it with. And now?" He looked at her, then at Gabriel, and smiled, that genuine smile that lit up his whole face. "Now I'm not alone." Sarah felt the familiar warmth in her chest, that warmth she had stopped questioning as gratitude and simply accepted as love. On December 20th, 5 days before Christmas, Carla called again. "Sarah, the police in the small town arrested Mark," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "What? When? Why?" "Yesterday. He was found trying to break into the house of an ex-girlfriend's parents. Apparently, she also had a restraining order against him that I didn't know about. When the police were called and checked his history, they saw all the accumulated complaints, yours, that other woman's, 2 others that appeared after your article in the Times. Sarah, there were 4 women with complaints against him. 4. Sarah felt nauseous. She was not the only one. Mark had a pattern, a history of violence she had never imagined. "Is he going to stay in jail?" she asked. "For now, yes. Bail was denied because he is considered a flight risk and a danger to the victims. The trial will take a while, but with 4 victims testifying, Sarah, he won't get out of this easily." After she hung up, Sarah sat on the balcony for a long time, processing. Relief, anger, sadness for the woman she had been, the one who believed his lies, who thought it was her fault, who considered going back when he showed up pleading that night months ago. David found her there, an hour later, silent tears streaming down her face. "Sarah?" What happened? He knelt in front of her, his hands holding her knees. She told him everything, and saw his expression change from worry to relief, to anger, and finally to something that looked like fierce victory. "It's over," he said, pulling her into his arms. "Sarah, it's really over. He can't hurt you anymore." And for the first time in months, maybe years, Sarah believed it. The threat that had loomed over her like a dark cloud had been removed. Mark was in jail. She was safe. Gabriel was safe. She cried for a long time in David's arms, but these were not tears of fear. They were tears of relief, of liberation, of closure. "I want to do something," she said, when she finally managed to speak again. "For the other women, the 4 who reported him, the countless others who probably suffered but didn't have the courage to speak up. I want to help somehow." David pulled back just enough to look her in the eyes. "How?" "I don't know yet. Maybe work with an NGO that supports victims of domestic violence. Maybe give talks, share my story, use my voice to help others find theirs." She took a deep breath. "Something good has to come out of all this. There has to be a purpose." "Then let's make it happen," David said simply. "When we get back to New York City, we'll look for organizations, see how you can contribute. You have a powerful story, Sarah, and if you're ready to use it to help others, I fully support you." Christmas in the Hamptons was different from any Christmas Sarah had ever had. There was no giant tree covered in expensive gifts or elaborate dinners with dozens of dishes. It was simple, intimate, perfect. David prepared a turkey, surprisingly well for someone who usually had chefs making his food, while Sarah made the stuffing and the rice pilaf her mother used to make. They ate on the balcony under the stars, Gabriel sleeping in the stroller beside them, the sound of the waves as background music. "His first Christmas," Sarah said, looking at her son. "He won't even remember." "But we will," David replied. "And we'll tell him when he's older about how this was the Christmas that changed everything, the Christmas when his mother finally became free, the Christmas when we became a real family." Sarah looked at him. This man who had entered her life when she was at rock bottom, and not only pulled her up, but walked beside her every step of the way. "David, I need to tell you something," she said, putting her fork down on the plate. "I get worried when you start like that," he tried to say. Just a joke, but she saw the real anxiety in his eyes. "When I met you that night in the rain, I was at my worst, broken, scared, hopeless, and you offered me a job. 2 months after the baby was born, I was supposed to be ready to move on with my life, remember?" "I remember. And I already told you that deal was nullified." "Let me finish," Sarah gently interrupted. "I'm telling you this because I need you to know that if I stay, it's not out of gratitude. It's not because I have nowhere to go. It's not because you have money or because you saved me. I stay because I love you. Because when I wake up in the morning, the first thing I want is to see your face. Because you make Gabriel laugh in a way no one else can. Because when I think of the future, you're in every image in my head." She took a deep breath, gathering courage for the hardest part. "But I also need you to know that I could leave now if I wanted to. David is in jail. I'm not running anymore. Carla offered for me to stay with her until I get settled. Laura mentioned positions at NGOs that would hire me. I have options now, David. And even with options, even being able to rebuild my life independently, I choose to stay. I choose you. I choose this that we are building together." When she finally looked at him, there were tears in his eyes. "Sarah," his voice was hoarse, You don't need to say anything. Right now," she continued, "I just needed you to know that this isn't a cage of gratitude. It's a free choice." David was silent for a long moment, his eyes fixed on her as if memorizing every detail. Then, slowly, he stood up, walked around the table, and knelt beside her chair. "Sarah Johnson," he began, his voice trembling but determined. "I entered this deal thinking I was saving you. But the truth is, you saved me. Saved me from a life empty of meaning, from mechanical days and lonely nights, from thinking that professional success was enough to fill the void where a family should be." He took her hands, intertwining their fingers. "In these months with you and Gabriel, I've been happier than in all my adult life. And I know it's early, I know we're still building this, but I also need you to know I'm completely in love with you. And not just with you, with Gabriel too. That boy—" He looked at the stroller where Gabriel was sleeping. "That boy is my son in every way that matters. I love him as if we shared DNA. And one day, when he's old enough to, understand, I want him to call me Dad, if you'll allow me." Sarah was openly crying now. "David." "So yes," he continued, "I accept your choice, and I make my own. I choose you. I choose Gabriel. I choose sleepless nights with a crying baby, and exhausting mornings, and the mess that comes with having a real family. I choose it all, Sarah, the whole package." She leaned in and kissed him, a salty kiss of tears, but full of promises, full of possible futures, full of hope. When they pulled apart, both were smiling through their tears. "Merry Christmas," Sarah whispered. "Merry Christmas," David replied, "the first of many." And there, on the porch of a beach house in the Hamptons, under a starry sky with the sound of the ocean in the background and a baby sleeping beside them, two broken souls found healing in each other. It wasn't magical. It wasn't a fairy tale where all problems disappeared with a kiss. But it was real, and true, and theirs. The next day, David woke Sarah early, a mischievous glint in his eyes that she hadn't seen in a while. "Come on," he said, "I have a surprise." They left Gabriel with the trusted housekeeper who took care of the beach house, a kind lady named Mrs. Thompson, and David drove Sarah to a more secluded part of the beach. There, set up in the sand with ribbons and colourful balloons, was a small makeshift altar, and in front of it, waiting with a warm smile, was a man Sarah recognized from photos in the New York City house, Father Michael, the priest who had baptized David as a child, and who apparently remained close to the family. "David, what is this?" Sarah asked, confused. "Sarah?" David turned to face her, taking her hands. "I know this is crazy. I know we've only known each other for 7 months. I know logic says we should wait longer, date more, be absolutely sure." He knelt in the sand, and Sarah's heart stopped. "But I'm already absolutely sure, a certainty that only comes once in a lifetime. You are the person I want to wake up with every day for the next 50 years. The person I want by my side in every joy and every hardship. The mother I want for Gabriel and for any other children we may have in the future." He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, opening it to reveal a simple yet elegant ring, a delicate solitaire in white gold. "Will you marry me, Sarah? Not a year or 2 from now. Now. Here. Father Michael can marry us today if you want. Or we can have a bigger ceremony in New York City later, with your sister and my team and whoever else you want. But I need you to know that I'm ready, completely, irrevocably ready, to make you my wife." Sarah was speechless, her hands covering her mouth, tears already falling. "This is crazy," she finally managed to say. "It is," David agreed with a smile. "Completely crazy, but it also feels absolutely right. I'm not asking because I feel I should or because I think you need legal protection or any other rational reason. I'm asking because I love you more than I thought it was possible to love. Someone. And when you know, you know. No need for more time." Sarah looked at him. This man who entered her life as a stranger, offering a business deal and became her family, her best friend, her love. She looked at Father Michael, patiently waiting, a knowing smile on his face. She gazed at the makeshift altar in the sand, decorated with love and hope, and she realized he was right. When you know, you know. "Yes," she said, her voice steady despite the tears. "Yes, I will marry you, David Anderson. Today, here, on this beach, yes." The smile that lit up his face was blinding. He stood up, lifted her into his arms and spun her around, both laughing like children. The ceremony was simple and perfect. Mrs. Thompson appeared as a witness, holding Gabriel in her arms. Father Michael led the vows with a warm voice that spoke of love, commitment, and building families on foundations of respect and true partnership. When David placed the ring on her finger and she put a simple band he had provided on his, Sarah felt as if a cycle was closing and another was beginning. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Father Michael announced joyfully. "David, you may kiss your bride." And he kissed her, there on the beach, with the sea breeze tousling their hair and the sun shining down on them. They kissed as husband and wife for the first time. Gabriel chose that exact moment to give his first real social smile. A huge, toothless grin, but absolutely genuine, as if he knew something special was happening. "He's smiling!" Sarah exclaimed. "David, look, he's really smiling." "Of course he is," David said, taking the baby from Mrs. Thompson and holding him between them. He knows that we are officially a family now." They took pictures, not professional, just with Mrs. Thompson's phone, but more precious than any elaborate session could produce. Sarah in the simple, white dress that David had secretly bought. David in a white shirt and beige pants, barefoot in the sand. Gabriel between them, smiling at the camera as if he understood exactly how important that moment was. When they returned to New York City in January, it felt like coming back completely changed. Sarah was no longer running away. She was coming home. To her home, now legally and in every other way. David hired a publicist to handle press matters, preparing an official statement about the wedding that would be distributed in a controlled manner. The photo they chose was one from the beach, the three of them together, smiling, genuine. "David Anderson marries in intimate beach ceremony," the headlines read. The story quickly became a media favorite. The successful businessman who fell in love with the woman he helped, who chose to build a family based on love and not obligation. But more important than public perception was what happened in private. Sarah began working with an NGO called New Beginnings that supported victims of domestic violence. She gave talks, shared her story, and helped other women find resources and courage to leave abusive situations. David reorganized his work schedule, delegating more and trusting his team more so he could be present. For family dinners, for Gabriel's first steps, which happened in February, early for a premature baby, but Gabriel had always been determined. For the little things that make life worthwhile. Carla visited regularly, rebuilding her relationship with her sister, enchanted by Gabriel and genuinely happy for Sarah's marriage. And one night in March, when Gabriel was 6 months old and starting to sit up on his own, David brought home documents he had asked Laura to prepare. "These are adoption papers," he explained to Sarah, his voice heavy with emotion. "If you agree, I would like to formally adopt Gabriel, to make him my son not just in heart, but also legally, to give him my name, if you allow." Sarah looked at the documents, then at David, then at Gabriel happily playing on the rug with his toys. "Gabriel Johnson," she tested the name. "It has a nice weight to it, solid." "So you agree?" "More than agree. I think it's perfect." She leaned in and kissed him softly. "Gabriel deserves to have a real father, and you deserve to be recognized for the amazing father you are, The papers were signed, processed, and 2 months later, Gabriel officially became Gabriel Johnson, son of Sarah Johnson and David Anderson. Not by blood, but by choice, and sometimes choice is stronger than blood. June returned, bringing with it a symbolism that did not go unnoticed by either of them. It had been exactly a year since that rainy night when Sarah, drenched and desperate, had asked for scraps of food at the door of the gourmet bistro. A year since David Anderson, a man who had sworn never to let anyone in, again opened his door and, unknowingly, his heart. Sarah was in the kitchen of the house in the Upper East Side, her home now, not just a temporary place, baking a chocolate cake, while Gabriel, sitting in his high chair, tried to eat pieces of banana with his own hands, making a delightful mess in the process. "No, my love, in your mouth," Sarah said for the 5th time, wiping banana from his hair. "The banana goes in your mouth, not in your hair." Gabriel just laughed, that delightful baby laugh that never failed to melt her heart, and threw more banana on the floor. "You are impossible today," she said, but there was no real irritation in her voice. Impossible and healthy was infinitely better than that fragile premature baby in the neonatal intensive care unit 8 months ago. David walked in through the front door at that moment, arriving earlier than usual. He had a plan for today, a plan he had been preparing for weeks. "Hi, family," he said, dropping his briefcase and loosening his tie. Gabriel immediately reached out his arms to... He was shouting, "Da-da-da!" He wasn't a full daddy yet, but he was getting there. David picked him up, banana and all, and spun around with him, making the baby giggle. "David, he's covered in food," Sarah protested, but she was smiling. "And so? I have more shirts," David said, planting a loud kiss on Gabriel's chubby cheek. "How are my 2 favorite loves?" "Good. I'm making a cake for after dinner." She wiped her hands on her apron. "Is there a special occasion I don't know about?" "Actually, yes," David said, setting Gabriel back in his high chair and stepping closer to her. "Sarah, do you know what day it is today?" She thought for a moment, then her eyes widened. It's the 1-year anniversary of when we met." "Exactly," he confirmed, his hands resting on her waist. "A year since the night that changed my life completely. And I have a surprise for you." "David, you didn't have to—" "Shh!" He placed a finger over her lips. "Let me do this, please." Sarah nodded, now curious. "Tonight, Mrs. Thompson is going to watch Gabriel. You and I are going out. And before you protest, Mrs. Thompson has raised 3 children of her own and countless grandchildren. Gabriel will be in extremely capable hands. Where are we going? It's a surprise, but wear something elegant. I'll pick you up at 7 sharp." At 7 in the evening, Sarah descended the stairs wearing a navy blue dress that David had bought for her months ago, but that she had never had the chance to wear. It was simple, yet elegant, accentuating her figure that she had regained after pregnancy through regular walks in the park with Gabriel. Her hair was down in waves that she'd spent 40 minutes trying to tame with subtle but polished makeup. She felt beautiful in a way she hadn't felt in years, not just physically, but deeply, as if beauty radiated from within. David was waiting at the bottom of the stairs, dressed in a dark grey suit that highlighted his broad shoulders and imposing height. When he saw her coming down, his expression melted into something that could only be described as adoration. "You are, Sarah, you are absolutely stunning," he said, offering his hand to help her down the last steps. "You don't look half bad yourself," she replied, adjusting his tie unnecessarily, just for the excuse to untouch him. Mrs. Thompson appeared with Gabriel in her arms. Go, enjoy your night. Little Gabriel and I are going to have so much fun, aren't we, sweetheart?" Gabriel, already in his pajamas and clearly sleepy after a busy day, just yawned. Sarah kissed his little head multiple times. If he cries too much, if you need anything. Sarah, Mrs. Thompson said firmly but kindly, I have my number, your number, Dr. Emily's number, and the hospital's number. Everything is under control. Go enjoy your night with your husband. Husband. The word still sent a little thrill of joy every time Sarah heard it. David's driver, Mr. Thompson, always discreet and reliable, took them through New York City. Sarah tried to guess the destination, but when they stopped in front of the gourmet bistro, her heart raced. David! Come on, he said simply, helping her out of the car. The restaurant was empty, completely empty, except for John, who was waiting for them at the entrance with a huge smile. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, the French chef said cheerfully. Everything is prepared just as you requested, David. Welcome back, Sarah. What a difference a year makes, doesn't it? Sarah was speechless. Had David rented the entire restaurant just for them? He guided her through the elegant dining room to the back area, the same area where she had been that rainy, drenched, desperate night. But now it was transformed. The trash cans had been removed, and in their place was a small, intimate table decorated with candles and flowers. Fairy lights were hung, creating a magical atmosphere. David, this is... She couldn't find the words. I wanted to bring you back here, he explained, pulling out her chair for her. Not to remind you of the pain of that night, but to celebrate how far we've come, to transform this place that holds such a difficult memory into something beautiful. Sarah sat down, tears already threatening to smudge her polished makeup. John appeared with a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. Tonight, I have prepared a special menu, he announced. Each dish represents something from your journey. The first dish was a delicate vegetable soup. Because it was with soup that Sarah fed David for the first time in that house, John explained with a knowing smile. The second was mushroom risotto. The first dish that Sarah cooked for David when he started working more from home. The third was Gabriel's favorite dish, a gourmet baby food adaptation that John had developed especially for the baby and that David always requested to take home. And so it went, dish after dish, each telling a part of their story. Between courses they talked. They reminisced about that first night, laughed about how Sarah almost stabbed him with a kitchen knife when he showed up unannounced that first time, talked about Gabriel's scary yet miraculous birth, and recalled the Hamptons and the impromptu wedding on the beach. I need to tell you something, David said when they were on dessert, a chocolate cake that was clearly a gourmet version of what Sarah had been making at home earlier. When I saw you that night a year ago, my first reaction wasn't compassion, it was anger. Sarah blinked, surprised. Anger. Anger at myself, he clarified, because I saw you there, devastated but still holding on to your dignity with everything you had, and it was like looking in the mirror of my past, like seeing my mother, and I was furious with myself for not having done more for her, for letting her suffer in silence for so long. Time. He took Sarah's hand across the table. Helping you was never about charity, Sarah. It was about redemption. It was about having a second chance to do what I didn't do before. But at some point, I don't know exactly when, you stopped being a way for me to atone for my guilt and became simply the person I can't imagine living without. David, her voice thick with emotion. Let me finish, he asked. We got married quickly, some would say too quickly, and maybe they would be right in theory. But Sarah, if I could go back in time, I wouldn't change a thing, not a comma, because every moment, every choice, every step brought us exactly here, and here is perfect. He stood up from the chair, and for a second Sarah thought he might kneel again, but he had already proposed, they were already married. I want to renew our vows, David said. Not because there's anything wrong with the ones we made on the beach. Those vows were true and perfect. But because I want to do it. Again, this time with your sister present, with my team who has become family, with Gabriel as an active part of the ceremony. I want the whole world to see how much I love you, how committed I am to this, to you, to our family." Sarah was openly crying now. "When?" "Whenever you want. A month from now, 6 months, a year, you decide. I just wanted you to know that this is my intention, that this isn't temporary for me. It never was." She stood up, walked around the table, and hugged him tightly. "I love you so much," she whispered against his chest, "so much that sometimes it still scares me." "I know what you mean," he replied, kissing the top of her head, "but the good kind of fear, the kind that keeps you committed, that makes you work to deserve it every day." They stayed like that for a long moment, embraced in the same place where everything had started a year ago, but now as husband and wife, as family. 2 weeks later, Sarah was at the headquarters of the non-profit organization Restart, preparing for a talk, when her cell phone rang. It was an unknown number from a small town. Her stomach tightened. Mark was still in jail, but the trial was set for the following month. Would it be about that? "Hello? Sarah Johnson?" a female voice asked. "Yes, that's me. My name is Julia Brown. I was one of the other women who reported Mark Thompson. I saw your interview in the Times and, well, I would like to talk to you if possible." Sarah sat down, her heart racing. Of course we can talk. Would you like to meet for coffee? I can come to your small town if... Actually, I'm in New York City. I came for a medical appointment and I thought maybe we could meet today. They arranged to meet at a cafe near the non-profit. Sarah arrived 15 minutes early, nervous in a way she couldn't explain. When Julia walked in, a woman in her late 20s with short blonde hair and green eyes that carried a familiar sadness, Sarah recognized her instantly as someone who understood. "Thank you for agreeing to meet me," Julia said as she sat down. "I know it's strange, but after reading your story, I needed to meet someone who understands." They talked for 3 hours. Julia shared her own story with Mark, how charming he had been at first, how the control started gradually, how the violence escalated, how she reported him after he broke 2 of her fingers during an argument, but then backed down and withdrew the complaint out of fear and pressure from his family. "When I saw that you had the courage not to back down, that you really faced him and left, that gave me courage too," Julia said, wiping away tears. "I went back to the police station, reactivated my complaint, and agreed to testify at the trial. And there are 2 more women doing the same. 4 of us, Sarah. 4 women he hurt who are now ready to make sure he pays." Sarah took her hand across the table. "You are so brave, much braver than I am." "No," Julia disagreed. "You were the first. You paved the way. Without your public story, I would never have found the strength." Before they said goodbye, Julia asked shyly, Do you think I will ever be able to trust someone again? Have a healthy relationship?" Sarah thought of David, of Gabriel, of the family they had built on the ruins of their broken pasts. "I think so," she said honestly. "It won't be easy, and it won't be quick. There will be days when you will want to give up, when you will doubt everything and everyone. But if you find someone willing to be patient, to earn your trust little by little, to show you through actions and not just words that love doesn't have to hurt, yes, I think you can have that. I have. And if I could, you can too." The trial of Mark took place in July on a hot and humid day. Sarah didn't need to be present. Her testimony had been recorded months earlier, but she chose to go. She chose to look him in the eyes one more time, not as a victim, but as a survivor. David went with her, as did Carla, and surprisingly, the other 3 women who had reported Mark. They sat together in the gallery, a united wall of survivors. When Mark entered in handcuffs, Sarah felt a tightening in her stomach, but it was no longer fear, it was anger. Anger for all the months she wasted with him, for all the tears she cried, for all the times she believed it was her fault. But when their eyes met, Sarah saw something she didn't expect. He was broken. The once confident and controlling man was visibly diminished, shoulders slumped, face thinner, eyes lacking that glint of superiority. The trial lasted 3 days. Testimonies were heard, evidence was presented, tears were shed, spilled. And in the end, the sentence came. 8 years in prison for multiple charges of domestic violence, threats, and stalking. It wasn't life imprisonment, it wasn't perfect justice, but it was something. It was official recognition that he had done wrong, that he had caused real harm to real women. When they left the courthouse, the 4 women embraced, crying, not out of sadness, but relief, closure. "It's strange," Julia said, wiping her face. "I thought I would feel avenged or happy, but I just feel tired." "It's because it's over," another woman, Patricia, said. "Finally, it's really over. Now we can truly move on." Sarah looked at David, waiting patiently a few meters away, giving them space, but ready to be there when she needed him. She glanced at Carla, her sister, who had driven 5 hours just to be there for her. "Do you have support?" Sarah asked the other women. "Family, therapy, structure?" 2 of them did. One, the youngest, Camilla, only 23, admitted that she didn't. "My family blamed me for provoking him. They said I was exaggerating. So when I came to testify, I came alone." Sarah and David exchanged a look, a silent communication that only couples who truly know each other can have. "Come on," Sarah said to Camilla. "Come have coffee with us. I want to introduce you to the non-profit where I work. They have resources, support, and other women who understand. You don't have to do this alone." When they returned to New York City that night, Sarah was emotionally exhausted, but also strangely at peace. Gabriel was sleeping when they arrived, but she went to the crib anyway, just to see him breathe, to remember why all of this had been worth it. David found her there 10 minutes later, just watching the baby sleep. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. "I am," she replied, and it was true. Today was hard, but necessary, like ripping off a bandage from a wound that needs to breathe to truly heal. "I'm proud of you," David said, wrapping his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on the top of her head. "For having the courage to face him, for the generosity of helping the other women. You could have just moved on with your life after he was arrested, but you chose to turn your pain into purpose." "I learned from the best," Sarah said, turning in his arms to face him. "You could have just given me charity that night and moved on with your life, but you chose to give me dignity, to give me a chance to rebuild. That changed everything, David, not just for me, but for all the women I can now help, because you gave me the tools to rise again." They kissed there, in the baby's room, with the nightlight projecting stars on the ceiling, and Gabriel sleeping peacefully just a few feet away. It wasn't a passionate or urgent kiss. It was a kiss of partnership, of renewed commitment, of mutual gratitude for having found each other in the most unlikely circumstances. "Let's get married again," Sarah said when they pulled apart. "The vow renewal ceremony you mentioned. Let's do it on the anniversary of our wedding at the beach, in the Hamptons, at the same place, with all our loved ones present this time." "Are you sure?" "Absolutely. Because I want to celebrate what we've built. I want to renew my promises, knowing exactly what I'm promising, having lived it, having tested it. I'm no longer choosing you out of necessity or gratitude, David. I'm choosing you because you are the best choice I've ever made in my life." The smile that lit up his face was radiant. "Then let's do it, a celebration worthy of the love we've built." And so, while Gabriel dreamed baby dreams and New York City buzzed with life outside, two survivors transformed into partners, into family, into a shared future, began to plan a celebration of everything they had overcome and everything they would still build together. Because real love stories don't end with happily ever after. They continue day after day, choice after choice, commitment after commitment, and their story was just beginning. September arrived bringing those first promises of spring, longer days, flowers beginning to bloom in the parks, a gentle warmth replacing the biting cold of New York winters. Sarah was at the office of the non-profit Restart, reviewing proposals for a new job training program for women victims of domestic violence, when her phone rang. It was Laura, the lawyer. "Sarah, hi. I have news about something that might interest you." "About Mark?" Sarah asked, her stomach tightening reflexively, even though she knew he was locked up behind bars. "No, nothing with him. It's actually about your mother." Sarah furrowed her brow, confused. "My mother? She passed away 15 years ago, Laura." "I know. But while I was organizing some legal documents for the vow renewal ceremony, I came across some old records. Sarah, your mother had a life insurance policy that was never claimed, a workplace benefit from the factory where she worked for years before she got sick." Sarah's heart raced. How much are we talking about? With accumulated interest and adjustments, about $180,000. Sarah had to sit down. $180,000. Money her mother had left behind, probably without even knowing, that could have completely changed her and Carla's lives after she died. "Why did no one ever tell us?" she asked, her voice trembling. "These things happen more than you can imagine. Companies don't make a point of advertising unclaimed benefits. But the money is legitimately yours and your sister's. You just need to file the formal request, and I can handle all the bureaucracy." After hanging up, Sarah sat at her desk for long minutes, processing. $90,000 for her. $90,000 for Carla. It wasn't a fortune that would drastically change lives, but it was freedom. It was security. It was the possibility of making choices without desperation. And the irony it went unnoticed. A year ago, that money would have been a lifesaver. It would have meant not having to ask for leftovers, not having to rely on the kindness of strangers. But now she had all of that. She had a home, a family, stability. So what to do with the money? That night, during dinner, with Gabriel sitting in his high chair eating pieces of chicken with his hands and making his usual mess, Sarah told David about the unexpected inheritance. $90,000, she said, still processing the number. "It's surreal." "It's a gift from your mother," David said gently. "One last gift she left for you." "I was thinking," Sarah began hesitantly, "I could use this money to help expand the programs of the non-profit. Create an emergency fund for women leaving abusive situations, for bus tickets, first month's rent, documents, those things that make the difference between getting out or staying trapped." David watched her with that expression she knew well, pride mixed with admiration. "You could," he agreed. "Or you could save it for yourself. Have your own financial security independent of me. There's no wrong answer here, Sarah." "But I don't need financial security," she pointed out. "I have you, I have our joint account, I have the salary from the non-profit now. That money could literally save lives if used the right way." "Then let's do both," David proposed. "You donate half to the non-profit, save half as your personal fund. 45,000 to help other women, 45,000 for you to have the peace of mind knowing you have your own resources if you ever need them." Sarah thought for a moment, then nodded. "That's a good idea. Balanced. I'll talk to Carla, see what she wants to do with her part." "And Sarah?" David took her hand across the table. I'm serious about you keeping half for yourself. Not because I think I'm going anywhere or because our marriage is at risk, but because you deserve to have financial autonomy. You deserve to never be in a position of completely depending on someone else, even if that someone is me." Her eyes burned with tears of gratitude. Even after everything, even being married and having built a life together, he still respected her autonomy so much, still cared so much about never replicating the power dynamics that had destroyed her in the past. "I love you," she said simply. "Every day I love you more, and I didn't know that was possible." "I know what you mean," he replied, squeezing her hand. "It's scary sometimes, isn't it? How much love can fit in one person." Gabriel chose that moment to throw a piece of chicken that landed perfectly in David's hair. They both looked at the baby, who was clapping proudly at his aim, and burst into laughter. "That boy is going to be a baseball pitcher when he grows up," David said, pulling the chicken from his hair. "Or a pastry chef who doesn't understand the concept of keeping food in the bowl," Sarah suggested. Moments like that, simple, domestic, filled with little joys, were what Sarah loved most. More than grand romantic gestures or elaborate surprises, those everyday moments of just being a family. The preparations for the vow renewal ceremony in the Hamptons consumed the following weeks. This time, it wouldn't be improvised. They hired an event planner who transformed the private beach into a fairy tale setting. Arches of white, flowers and tropical foliage, chairs decorated with flowing fabrics, an altar built in the sand with a direct view of the sea. Special lighting for when the sun set. A menu crafted by John that celebrated Sarah and David's culinary journey. The guest list was small but meaningful. Carla and her new boyfriend, a history teacher she had met in a book club who seemed genuinely good for her. Lisa and her mother, who was recovering well from surgery. John and his wife. Laura and her husband, some of the closest managers from David's restaurants who had become true friends over the years. The team from the Restart non-profit, including Emily, the young woman who had testified against Mark and now worked as a volunteer helping other survivors. And, of course, Father Michael, who had married them the first time and was more than happy to conduct the ceremony again. Gabriel would have a special role. At 10 months, he was already crawling at an impressive speed and starting to take steps while holding onto furniture. They had prepared a small, decorated cart that he would push down the aisle, with plenty of help from Carla, of course, but the intention was what mattered. 2 days before the ceremony, Sarah was in the room in the Hamptons trying on the dress for the 3rd time. A more elaborate dress this time, all in white lace with a light train, an off-the-shoulder neckline that showed her collarbone without being too bold, when Carla walked in. "You look beautiful," her sister said, her eyes shining. "Mom would be so proud to see you now." Sarah felt the familiar tightness in her throat. "Do you think?" "I know she would," Carla said with conviction. "She always wanted us to be happy, to find people who treated us well. And look at you, married to a man who adores you, with a healthy son, doing work that matters. Sarah, you didn't just survive, you thrived." The two embraced, and it felt like a circle was closing. All those nights Carla had tried to convince her to leave Mark, all the fights, all the forced distance, that was all in the past now. They had reconnected, not just as sisters, but as adult women who understood and respected each other. "I want to ask you something," Sarah said, when they pulled apart. "I want you to be my official maid of honor. I know there wasn't a real ceremony the first time, but now there is, and I can't imagine anyone more important to be by my side." Sarah began to cry immediately. "Really? Carla, I would be honored. And there's more." Sarah took a deep breath. "David and I talked, and when we have another child, and we want to have more children, We would like you to be the godmother as well. You are the only family I have, Carla, and I want you to be an important part of my children's lives. Children, plural, Carla asked with a smile through her tears. Are you already planning to expand the family? Not actively yet, but yes, we want to. David wants to give Gabriel siblings, a big, noisy family, everything he didn't have growing up. Sarah smiled. And I discovered that I truly love being a mother. I want to do it again, this time from the very beginning, without the fear and trauma coloring everything. The day of the ceremony dawned perfect, a blue sky without a cloud, pleasant temperature with a gentle sea breeze. Guests began to arrive around 4 in the afternoon, settling into the decorated chairs as live music played softly. Sarah was in the room getting ready with the help of Carla and Lisa, who had formed an unlikely friendship in recent months. Gabriel was with Mrs. Thompson, already dressed in a tiny suspender and bow tie that made him look like a little gentleman. "It's time," Carla announced when the clock struck 5. Sarah took a deep breath, looking at herself in the mirror one last time. The dress fit perfectly. Her hair was styled in an elegant low bun with a few loose strands framing her face, and her makeup highlighted her eyes without being overdone. But more than all of that, it was the expression on her face that surprised her. Peace, pure joy. The face of a woman who had finally, completely found her place in the world. The music changed, an instrumental version of 1,000 Years, and it was the signal. Mrs. Thompson began to walk down the sandy aisle, pushing the decorated stroller where Gabriel was sitting, waving excitedly to all the guests and making everyone laugh. Then came Carla, beautiful in a light blue dress, smiling through happy tears, and then it was Sarah's turn. She began to walk alone, a deliberate choice. No one would give her away to David because she was not property to be transferred. She was going to him by her own choice, on her own legs, a free woman choosing her partner. When her eyes met his at the end of the aisle, the whole world disappeared. David looked impeccable in a white suit that contrasted beautifully with his tanned skin, but it was his eyes, those dark eyes that once seemed so cold and calculating, that captivated her. They were shining with unshed tears, with love so intense it was almost palpable. She reached the altar, and he took her hands, squeezing gently. "Hi," he whispered. "Hi," she replied, smiling. Father Michael began the ceremony with words about journeys, about how true love is not found in fairy tales, but built day after day through conscious choices to show up for one another. "David and Sarah," he said, his warm voice reaching everyone present. "When I married you for the first time on this same beach, a few months ago, it was a moment of impulse, of sudden certainty amid uncertainty. Today, you renew those vows not out of impulse, but out of knowledge. You have lived together through joys and difficulties. You faced fears and overcame them. You built a family and a home, and now, in front of all those you love, you choose to renew your commitment." David was the first to speak his vows. He pulled a piece of paper from his pocket. To Sarah's surprise, he had written them down. "Sarah," he began, his voice steady despite the tears in his eyes, "when I met you 15 months ago, I was a man who had given up on true love, who believed that professional success was enough, who kept everyone at a distance to avoid being hurt again. But you, without asking for permission, without even trying, demolished all those walls I had built." He paused, taking a deep breath to control his emotion. "You taught me that vulnerability is not weakness, that letting someone in, truly letting someone in, is the bravest act there is. You taught me that family is not defined by blood, but by choice, by showing up, by daily love. And more importantly, you taught me that I am capable of loving again, deeply without fear." He held her hands more firmly. "So today, Before God and all those we love, I renew my vows to you. I promise to continue choosing you every day. I promise to never let work be more important than our family. I promise to be the father Gabriel deserves and any other child we have deserves. I promise to listen to you, respect you, honor you as my equal and my partner. And I promise to love you on the easy days when everything is perfect, and on the hard days when the world seems to be falling apart, with every part of who I am. There was not a dry eye in the audience when he finished. Sarah was openly crying, but smiling as well. "David," she began, her voice trembling but clear, 15 months ago I was at my lowest point, broken, scared, hopeless. If someone had told me that day that in just over a year I would be here, married to an incredible man, with a healthy child, doing meaningful work and genuinely happy, I would have thought it impossible. She wiped her tears, took a deep breath. But you showed me that impossible is just a word. You gave me dignity when I thought I deserved none. You gave me choice when I was used to having everything decided for me. You gave me love when I didn't even know what true love was anymore. Her voice grew stronger now, more confident. You never tried to save me. Instead, you gave me the tools to save myself. You gave me space to heal, time to rebuild, support to rise again. And when I was finally on my feet again, you didn't expect gratitude or submission. You expected partnership. You expected me to be your equal. She squeezed his hands. So today, I renew my vows to you not as someone who owes you something, but as someone who chooses you freely. I promise to be your partner in all things. I promise to challenge you when you need to be challenged and support you when you need support. I promise to raise our children with love and respect. I promise to never let the past define our future. And I promise to love you, this incredible man who sees beyond appearances, who values substance over surface, who chose to turn a random rainy night into a lifelong love story, with every beat of my heart. Father Michael had to pause for a moment to compose himself before continuing. The rings. Gabriel, who had been surprisingly quiet until now, chose that moment to shout, "Mama!" loud and clear, the first time he said the complete word. Sarah turned, laughing and crying at the same time, and Gabriel clapped proudly for himself. "I think someone wants to participate more actively," Father Michael said with a smile. "Maybe we should include Gabriel in the vows too." David and Sarah exchanged a glance, then nodded. David went to Gabriel and picked him up, bringing him to the altar. "Gabriel Johnson," David said solemnly, holding the baby up so everyone could see. "You may not understand these words now, but one day you will. I promise to be the best father I can be for you. I promise to be present for every important moment in your life. I promise to teach you about respect, kindness, courage. I promise to show you that family is about love, not about DNA. And I promise to love your mother every day of my life, giving you the example of how healthy relationships should be." Sarah was now sobbing, and half of the guests were too. "I think that's a yes from him," Father Michael said, as Gabriel decided to grab David's nose. "So, by the power vested in me, and with the blessing of this young gentleman here, I renew your union. David and Sarah, you are already husband and wife, but today you renew your commitment in front of all those who love you. Keep loving each other, keep choosing each other, keep building this beautiful family. David, you may kiss your wife." Again, and he kissed her. There on the beach, holding Gabriel between them as the sun began to set, painting the sky pink and orange, they kissed as renewed husband and wife. The guests erupted in applause and cheers. Gabriel, excited by the noise, started clapping too, making everyone laugh. The celebration that followed was perfect. Delicious food prepared by John, dancing on the sand under the stars, emotional speeches from Carla, from Lisa, from Father Michael, photos that captured not perfect poses, but genuine moments of joy. At one point in the night, when Gabriel was already sleeping in Mrs. Thompson's arms, and the guests were dancing joyfully, Sarah and David stepped away from the party and walked to the water's edge. "Are you happy?" David asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind as they watched the waves gently break. "More than I knew was possible," Sarah replied honestly. "Sometimes I still pinch myself to make sure this is real, that you are real, that this life is truly mine." "It's real," he promised, kissing the side of her neck. "And it's just the beginning, Sarah. We have so much ahead of us. More children, watching Gabriel grow, growing old together, building more memories. A lifetime." "A lifetime," she repeated, turning in his arms to look at him. "I like the sound of that." They stood there for long minutes, just holding each other, listening to the ocean and the distant music from the party. Two survivors who had become more than the sum of their traumas. They had become family. They had become home to each other. They had become a promise of the future. And as the stars shone above and the waves sang their eternal song, Sarah realized something fundamental. She no longer needed anyone's leftovers. She had a complete and abundant lifetime, built on free choices and true love. And that was more than she had dared to dream on that rainy night 15 months ago. It was everything. June came around again, completing the 2-year cycle since that rainy night that changed everything. New York City was in the midst of winter, but this time the cold did not bring despair. It brought memories of rebirth, transformation, miracles disguised as fortuitous encounters. Sarah was in the garden of their house in the Upper East Side, watching Gabriel, now a year and a half old, run after soap bubbles she blew. He had started walking at 1 year and 3 months, and since then he hadn't stopped. He was a cheerful, curious child, too talkative for his age, according to the pediatrician, and completely in love with the man he called Daddy. "Mama, look, look!" Gabriel shouted every time he managed to pop a bubble, turning to make sure she was paying attention to his achievement. "I see you. My love, you're amazing," Sarah replied, her heart overflowing with that maternal love that never aged, never diminished, only grew. David appeared at the kitchen door, carrying a tray with lemonade and cookies. It was 3 in the afternoon on a Saturday. The whole day he now religiously reserved for family, no matter what was happening at the restaurants. "Snack time," he announced, and Gabriel immediately dropped the bubbles and ran to him, arms outstretched. Daddy, cookie!" David easily scooped him up, although Gabriel was getting heavy, and gave him a loud kiss on the cheek. "First, let's wash those little soapy hands, little rascal, then cookie." They settled at the garden table, Gabriel sitting on David's lap while munching on cookies, and Sarah sipping lemonade, enjoying the sunny winter afternoon. "I have some news," Sarah said, an unconscious hand going to her belly, "but I wanted to do it differently this time. I wanted it to be special." David looked at her attentively, his analytical eyes immediately catching her gesture. "Sarah?" "Shh, let me do it my way," she said with a smile. "Gabriel, sweetheart, look here." She pulled out a small box she had hidden in her coat pocket. Inside was a tiny onesie with the phrase, "Promoted to Big Brother." Gabriel looked at the outfit, confused, then tried to put it on his head like he did with his own hats, making Sarah laugh. "No, my love, this is for the baby in Mommy's belly. You're going to be a big brother." David froze completely, his hand reaching for another cookie suspended in midair. You are pregnant?" he asked, his voice hoarse with emotion. 9 weeks. I took the test yesterday. I wanted to be sure before telling, and the baby is fine, healthy, growing just right, according to Dr. Emily." Sarah smiled through the tears that were already starting to fall. "We're having another baby, David." He gently set Gabriel down. The boy immediately went back to chasing imaginary bubbles and pulled Sarah into his arms, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. "We're going to have a baby," he repeated, his voice breaking. "Sarah, I have no words. I was scared to tell you," she admitted against his chest. "I know we didn't plan this right now. I know Gabriel is still little. I know it might complicate work and—" "Stop," David interrupted firmly, pulling back just enough to look her in the eyes. "Sarah, this is the best news you could give me. The best. There is no wrong time to expand our family. There is only the right time, and this is it." He kissed her deeply, then knelt and kissed her still, flat belly. "Hi, little one. Your daddy already loves you so much. So much." Gabriel, seeing his father on his knees, decided it was a game and jumped onto David's back, shouting, "Horsey, Daddy Horsey." David laughed, scooped up Gabriel and Sarah together in a bear hug, the three of them together, and soon to be four. "A real family," he whispered. "Complete." This pregnancy was completely different this time. Sarah was not running away. She was not alone. She was not starving. She was surrounded by love, care, and already knew what to expect. Still, there were fears. Fear of another premature birth. Fear of complications. Fear of not being able to love another baby as much as she loved Gabriel. A fear that Dr. Emily assured her was completely normal and unfounded. "A mother's heart doesn't divide love," the doctor said during a checkup. "It multiplies. You'll see." David was even more attentive this time, if that was possible. He attended every appointment, read even more books about babies and child development, and was already planning to renovate another room for the new family member. "What if it's a girl?" he asked one night while they were lying in bed, his hand protectively resting on her belly that was starting to round. "Have you thought of names?" "If it's a girl, I want to name her Helena," Sarah said. "It was my mother's name. And if it's a boy, you choose this time." "Sarah, you let me choose Gabriel's name." "No, I asked for a suggestion, and the suggestion was perfect. But this time, if it's a boy, I want it to be completely your choice. No interference from me." David was quiet for a long moment, his fingers tracing distracted circles on her belly. "Miguel," he finally said. "If it's a boy, Miguel. In honor of Father Michael, who married us, who was important in my life when I was a child, who represents everything good about faith and family. Miguel Johnson," Sarah tested the name, "or Helena Johnson, both perfect." When Sarah was 5 months pregnant, the non-profit organization Restart received national recognition for its innovative work supporting victims of domestic violence. The emergency fund program that Sarah had helped create with her mother's inheritance was saving lives. 46 women had managed to escape abusive situations thanks to the resources provided. The award ceremony was in Washington, D.C., and Sarah was invited to receive the award on behalf of the organization and give a speech. "I don't know if I can do it," she admitted to David the night before. "Speaking to hundreds of people with cameras, live broadcast. What if I freeze? What if I forget what I wanted to say?" "Then you improvise," David said calmly. "Sarah, you talk to groups of women every week. You share your story, inspire people, change lives. This is just a bigger audience. The heart of the message is the same." "Will you be there?" she asked, hating how small and insecure her voice sounded. "Do you really think I would miss this?" he replied, pulling her into his arms. "I, Carla Gabriel, will be in the front row, and if you look at us and us only, it will be like speaking to 3 people. The others don't matter." The auditorium in Washington, D.C. was packed. Government officials, representatives of NGOs from across the country, activists, journalists. The lights were bright, the cameras intimidating. Sarah was backstage with sweaty hands, her heart racing, mentally going over the speech she had prepared. The 5-month bump was visible under the elegant navy blue dress she had chosen. Sarah Johnson, founder of the Rebirth Program of the Restart nonprofit organization, the presenter announced. She took a deep breath, 1, 2, 3 times, and walked to the stage. The lights were so bright that she could barely see the audience, but she searched anyway and found, front row, David holding Gabriel in his lap, Carla next to them. David smiled and waved slightly. Gabriel mimicked the gesture enthusiastically. Sarah smiled back, felt the tension leave her shoulders, and began to speak. 2 years ago, she started, her voice strong, echoing through the auditorium. I was in the rain, 6 months pregnant, begging for scraps of food at the door of a restaurant. I had fled an abusive relationship with only $300 in my pocket and a backpack with my clothes. I had nowhere to go, no support network, no hope. The silence in the auditorium was absolute, all eyes fixed on her. That night, a man, who is now my husband and the father of my child, offered me something that changed everything. He didn't offer me charity. He offered me dignity. He offered me work, housing, the chance to rebuild my life with my own hands. And that made all the difference. She looked at David, saw the tears in his eyes, even from afar. The Rebirth Program was created with a simple premise. Women escaping domestic violence situations do not need pity. They need concrete resources. They need bus tickets to leave the city where they are in danger. They need money for first month's rent. They need help with documentation, legal processes, and childcare while they look for work. They need dignity. She paused, letting the words weigh in the air. In the last few months, 46 women have used our emergency fund to restart their lives. 46 women who could have returned to abusive relationships out of financial desperation managed to leave and stay out. 46 stories of courage that deserve to be celebrated. The audience began to applaud, but Sarah gently raised her hand, asking for silence. She had more to say. But we are not here just to celebrate. We are here to recognize that 46 is a drop in the ocean. There are thousands, perhaps millions of women in the US trapped in similar situations. And while our program helps some, we need larger systemic changes. Her voice grew stronger, more passionate. We need stricter laws against abusers. We need real enforcement of these laws. We need education from an early age about healthy relationships and signs of abuse. We need adequate shelters, police stations prepared to receive reports, a judicial system that does not re-victimize those who have had the courage to report. We need a society that stops asking, "Why didn't she leave?" and starts asking, "Why did he think he had the right to hurt?" The auditorium erupted in applause. People stood up. Sarah saw women crying, saw men with thoughtful expressions, saw change happening in real time as people absorbed her words. "So I accept this award," she continued as the applause subsided. "Not in my name, but in the name of all survivors, those who managed to leave and those who are still fighting, those who found their voice and those who are still silenced. And I make a promise. I will use this platform, this visibility, every available resource to continue fighting, until no woman has to beg for scraps of food in the rain, until all have the chance to rebuild with dignity. Thank you." The ovation was deafening. Sarah accepted the trophy, a beautiful sculpture of a woman with wings, and left the stage with shaky legs but a full heart. Backstage, David was waiting for her, Gabriel in one arm and the other extended to her. She threw herself into his embrace, finally letting the tears fall. "I am so proud of you," he whispered against her hair. "So immensely proud." "I was so nervous," she admitted. "You couldn't tell. You were powerful, articulate, inspiring. Sarah, you changed minds today. I saw it happen." Gabriel, squeezed between them, decided it was time for attention. "Mama! Mama there!" He pointed to the stage, obviously impressed to see his mother in such a big place. "That's right, Gabriel. Mommy was amazing." Carla appeared, also crying. "Sarah, my God, I had no idea you had that speech in you. It was perfect." In the months that followed, Sarah's speech went viral on social media. Excerpts were shared millions of times. She began receiving speaking invitations at universities, conferences, and corporate events. The non-profit organization Restart saw donations triple. But more important than all of this were the messages. Hundreds, then thousands of women writing to say that her speech inspired them to leave, to report, to seek help. Women saying they finally understood they were not crazy, not weak, not to blame. "I created a monster," David joked one night when Sarah was responding to emails at 11 o'clock, already in her 8th month of pregnancy and theoretically should be resting. "A monster with purpose," she replied with a smile. "And you love this monster." "I do," he confirmed, gently closing the laptop. "But this monster needs to sleep. The baby needs you to rest." "Just 5 more emails." "Sarah," he said more firmly, "you have been doing amazing things. You are literally changing the world. But you can't do anything if you completely exhaust yourself. Delegate, trust the team, and take care of yourself too. Please." She knew he was right. Sighing, she agreed. "Okay, just let me respond to this last one. It's from a 17-year-old girl who just left home." David read over her shoulder as she typed a caring yet encouraging response, connecting the girl with local resources in her city. "You are amazing," he said when she finally closed the laptop. "Did you know that?" "You tell me that often," Sarah replied, struggling to get up, her huge belly making every movement a challenge. "Because it's true, and because I think you need to hear it until you really start to believe it. I believe," she said, turning to face him. "Today, I believe. 2 years ago, I thought I was worth nothing. Today I know my worth, that I have value independent of any man, any relationship. And you know what's most ironic? It was you, a man, who helped me realize this." "No." "I did," David corrected. "You already had this inside you. I just removed a few obstacles along the way." Helena Johnson was born on a sunny day in January, 3 weeks before her due date, but perfectly healthy. Unlike Gabriel, she was born calmly, without drama, in a peaceful, natural birth that lasted only 6 hours. When the nurse placed the baby in Sarah's arms for the first time, she was struck by how different Helena was from Gabriel, even at such a small size. While Gabriel had been born with a lot of black hair, Helena had only a fine blonde fuzz. While Gabriel was all chubby, Helena was delicate, almost ethereal. "She's perfect," David whispered, looking at his daughter with reverent admiration. "Absolutely perfect." Gabriel, who had stayed with Mrs. Thompson during the birth, was brought in to meet his sister a few hours later. Now 2 years old, he immediately understood that this little baby was important. "Baby, Mama?" he asked, gently touching Helena's little face. "Yes, my love. This is your little sister Helena. You will take care of her and protect her, won't you?" Gabriel nodded solemnly. "Take care, baby." And he did. From that first day, Gabriel took his role as big brother with adorable seriousness. He brought diapers when asked, sang to Helena when she cried, and insisted on kissing his sister goodnight every night. Seeing his 2 children together, Gabriel so animated and talkative, Helena so calm and observant, made Sarah's heart overflow in a way she couldn't express in words. Gabriel's 2nd birthday, now coinciding with Helena being 3 months old, was celebrated with a small but meaningful party in the backyard of their home. The same people who had been in the Hamptons for the vow renewal, now joined by some of the friends Gabriel had made at the preschool he had just started attending. There were superhero decorations, Gabriel's current obsession, chocolate cake, games, laughter. Helena slept, peacefully in her stroller for most of the time, occasionally waking to nurse and then drifting back to sleep. When it was time to sing Happy Birthday, Sarah held Helena while David helped Gabriel blow out the candles on the cake. Everyone sang. Gabriel clapped excitedly, and Sarah took a mental picture of that moment, her family, her real, chosen, beloved family. "You make a wish when you blow out the candles, Gabriel," David explained. "What do you want to wish for?" Gabriel thought for a moment, with that seriousness that small children have when processing something important. "I want everyone to stay together forever," he declared, with the absolute conviction of childhood. "Amen to that," Carla said softly, wiping away tears. David and Sarah exchanged a glance over Gabriel's head. They didn't need words. The promise was clear in both their eyes. They would do everything in their power to ensure that his wish came true. That night, after all the guests had gone home and the kids were asleep, Gabriel exhausted from the excitement, Helena calm as always, Sarah and David sat in the garden under the stars. 2 years, Sarah said, resting her head on his shoulder. "It feels like a lifetime, and yet it feels like it was yesterday." "I know what you mean," David agreed, kissing the top of her head. "Sometimes I still wake up and wonder if all of this is real. If you are real." "We are very real," she assured him. "Too real sometimes, with bills to pay, diapers to change, sleepless nights, occasional arguments about who forgot to buy milk." "Reality is better than any fantasy," David said with conviction. "Don't you miss your life before?" Sarah asked, an old insecurity resurfacing. "The quiet nights, the total control over your time, being able to come and go without worrying about school schedules and pediatric appointments." David was quiet for so long that Sarah began to worry. Then he spoke, his voice heavy with emotion. "Sarah, that life I had before was empty. I had success, money, recognition, and I was deeply unhappy without even realizing it. It was like living in black and white without knowing that colors existed. And then you came along and it was like someone painted my whole world. Vibrant, messy, imperfect but alive, truly alive." He turned to look at her, holding her face in his hands. "I don't miss peace and quiet, because I never had true peace until you. I had stillness, silence, solitude disguised as independence. Now I have chaos, noise, dirty diapers, and scattered toys. And it's the most beautiful thing I've ever experienced, because it's not empty, it's full of life, love, purpose." Sarah kissed him, a long and deep kiss that said everything words couldn't. "Thank you," she whispered when they pulled apart, "for choosing me that night, for continuing to choose me every day since then." "Thank you for letting me choose you," David replied, "and for choosing me back." They stayed there late, talking about future plans, about maybe having a third child eventually, about expanding the non-profit organization to other cities, about opening more restaurants with social concepts, about growing old together and seeing Gabriel and Helena have their own families one day, dreams, plans, possible futures. Everything Sarah didn't have 2 years ago when she was drenched in the rain, begging for scraps. The next morning, Sarah woke up early. Helena had nursed at 5, and she couldn't go back to sleep. She went down to the kitchen and decided to make the same vegetable soup she had made for David that first night. Not because she was hungry, but because she wanted to celebrate. Celebrate the full circle. Celebrate the journey. David came down an hour later, drawn by the smell. "Soup for breakfast?" he asked, still sleepy. "Special soup," Sarah corrected, serving him a bowl. "The same one I made 2 years ago when you came home after that fight with Julia and Peter, remember?" "I remember," David said, accepting the bowl. "It was the first time we really talked, the first time I let my guard down." With you. Exactly. Sarah served herself a bowl and sat next to him. I wanted to do it again, to close the circle, to remember how much we've changed, how much we've grown. They ate in comfortable silence, savoring not just the food, but the moment, the symbolism, the journey that simple soup represented. Sarah, David said when he finished, I never asked you this, but I need to know. Do you regret anything? How everything happened? Accepting my deal that first night? Sarah thought carefully before answering. It was an important question, deserving an honest response. I regret taking so long to leave my relationship with Mark, she said slowly. I regret not listening to my sister when she tried to warn me. I regret wasting months of my life in fear and pain. She took his hand across the table. But I don't regret a single second since I met you. Not the difficult moments, not the uncertainties, not the fears, because all of that brought us here, and here is exactly where I should be. I don't regret anything either, David said. Not making that impulsive decision to help you, not falling in love when I swore. I wouldn't do it again, not diving headfirst into this family we've built. It was the best decision I ever made. Upstairs, they heard Gabriel waking up. They could tell by the specific sound of his little feet running down the hallway, followed by his voice calling, "Mummy, Daddy!" Our human alarm clock, David said with a smile. The best kind, Sarah agreed. Gabriel appeared in the kitchen seconds later, his hair all messy from sleep, holding the teddy bear that David had given him on his first birthday. "Good morning, champ," David said, getting up to pick up his son. "Did you sleep well?" "I dreamed about a party," Gabriel announced excitedly. "A big party." "That's because it was your party yesterday," Sarah explained. "Your birthday." "My birthday," Gabriel agreed, proud to have understood the concept. And thus began another day. A noisy breakfast with Gabriel telling incomprehensible but enthusiastic stories. Helena waking up and needing to be changed and fed. Playing in the garden. Lunch that Gabriel spilled more than he ate. An afternoon nap for the kids that Sarah and David took as stolen moments just for them. It was common, ordinary, absolutely perfect. That night, when the kids were finally asleep and the house was quiet, Sarah went to the closet and grabbed that first backpack she had brought with her from the small town 2 years ago. She had kept it, not knowing exactly why. She sat on the closet floor and opened it slowly. Inside were the 2 worn outfits, the documents, a faded photo of her with her mother and Carla, and at the bottom, wrapped in a cloth, the positive pregnancy test for Gabriel. She held that piece of plastic that had changed everything, that had made her run away, start over, find David, build a family. "What are you doing down there on the floor?" David asked, finding her. "Remembering," she said, showing him the backpack, the test. "Thinking about how much has changed." He sat down next to her on the closet floor, looking at those artifacts from a past that seemed to belong to someone else. "You should write your story," he said suddenly. "A book, so that other women can read and be inspired, so that Gabriel and Helena can understand when they are older." "I'm not a writer," Sarah protested. "You weren't a speaker either. And look at you now, changing lives with your words. Sarah, you have a gift for storytelling, for connecting with people. A book would reach even more people." Sarah looked at that pregnancy test, thought about everything that had happened since then, and for the first time, seriously considered the idea. "Maybe," she said, "maybe one day, when I know how to finish the story." "The story doesn't end," David said with a smile. "It continues, but you could tell the chapters up to here. The rest is for a sequel." Sarah laughed, imagining a book, her story in her, words to help others. "If I write," she said, "it will be called Don't Throw Away the Leftovers, and it will be dedicated to you, to the man who taught me that I was never leftovers. I was always whole, complete, valuable. I was just looking in the wrong place. David kissed her deeply, there on the closet floor, surrounded by memories of the past and promises of the future. They weren't leftovers either, he said when they pulled apart. They were a temporarily forgotten treasure, waiting to be found. 5 years later, the house was in happy chaos. Gabriel, now 7, was helping Helena, 5, put together a princess costume for a little friend's birthday party. Michael, the middle child at 3, was determined to help too, which basically meant messing up everything his siblings were trying to organize. "Michael, no!" Helena shouted as her brother tried to glue glitter to his own face. "Glitter is only for the costume." "But I want to shine," Michael protested with the irrefutable logic of a 3-year-old. Sarah walked into the kids' room and had to laugh at the scene, her 3 children covered in glitter, ribbons and fabric. A complete mess, an absolute joy. "Okay, little team," she said. "The party is only in 2 hours. How about we clean this up and take a bath first?" "Mommy," Michael ran to her and hugged her, transferring glitter to her clothes. "I love you to the moon." "I love you to the moon and back," Sarah replied automatically, kissing his head. Gabriel, always the most mature of the 3, began to efficiently organize. "Helena, you grab the ribbons. Michael, you put away the glitter. I'll tidy up the fabric. Let's go, team!" Sarah watched with pride as her children worked together, occasionally arguing, but always coming back together. 3 personalities so different, but who genuinely loved each other. David appeared at the door, returning from a morning meeting. His eyes captured the scene, his wife covered in glitter, their 3 children in creative chaos mode, and he smiled that smile that still made her heart race even after 7 years together. "The reinforcements have arrived," he announced. "Who needs help with the bath?" "Me!" the 3 shouted simultaneously, running toward him. David picked up Michael, held Helena's hand, and signaled for Gabriel to go ahead. "Bath operation in progress. Sarah, you are free for 40 minutes. 40 minutes, she repeated, as if it were a precious treasure, because it was. "What do I do with 40 minutes? "Take a shower too. You're shining more than a disco ball with all that glitter." Sarah looked in the mirror and laughed. She really was covered in glitter. How had that gotten in her hair? She took advantage of the 40 minutes to take a long shower, put on something comfortable yet presentable, and check her emails on her phone. There was a message from her publisher. Her book, Don't Throw Away the Leftovers, had sold over 500,000 copies since its launch 2 years ago. It was going into its 12th edition. 500,000 women, and men too, had read her story. How many lives had that touched? How many women had found the courage to leave? How many men had reflected on their behavior? It was impossible to quantify the impact, but the messages that arrived daily gave an idea. Stories of transformation, of liberation, of new beginnings. Later that night, after the party, which was a success despite Michael eating too much cake, and getting sick after the kids were finally asleep after much negotiation, Sarah and David found each other in the garden under the stars. It was where they always returned, their place, where they talked about important things, where they solved problems, where they dreamed together. "Michael suggested today that we should have another baby," David commented humorously. "According to him, 4 kids is a better number than 3, because then no one is left alone on teams." Sarah laughed. "His logic is flawed but adorable. And you, do you want a 4th child?" "I would be happy with the whole soccer team if you wanted," David said honestly. "But I would also be equally happy if we decided that 3 is perfect. It's not about the number, Sarah. It's about the family we already have." 3 is perfect, Sarah agreed. "For now, at least. Maybe we'll revisit this conversation in a few years." Deal. They remained in comfortable silence, listening to the nighttime sounds of the garden. Sarah thought about everything they had built in the 7 years since that rainy night. the lives they had created, the people they had become. "Are you happy?" she asked, echoing the question he had asked her years ago. "More than I knew was possible," David replied, using the exact words she had used back then. "And you?" Sarah looked at the house where their 3 children slept. She thought about the non-profit organization that now had branches in 8 states. She thought about the book that was changing lives. She thought about the man beside her, her partner in all things. "I have everything I never knew I wanted," she said. "And more. Always more. With you, it's always more." David pulled her into a hug, and they stayed. Like that under the stars, 2 survivors who had found in each other not only salvation, but true partnership. The journey that began with leftovers had transformed into a feast of life. And the story continued, chapter after chapter, choice after choice, love after love. Not perfect, never perfect, but real and true and absolutely theirs. And sometimes that is better than any fairy tale.